When a single father offers his table to a stranger at a crowded restaurant, he has no idea she's the CEO who could change his life, or that her violent ex is watching from across the room. What begins as simple kindness erupts into a confrontation that will force both of them to decide who they really are when everything is on the line. If you want to see how one quiet act of courage can shatter years of control and fear, stay with me until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets outside Marcello's, turning the Friday night sidewalk into a slick mirror of neon and headlights. Inside, the restaurant hummed with the kind of controlled chaos that only happened when every table was full and the host was running out of excuses. Ethan Brooks sat alone in a corner booth, his jacket still damp from the walk-over, watching condensation slide down his water glass. He'd lied to get here, not a big lie. Just told his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, he had a work thing, something he couldn't get out of. She'd smiled that knowing smile of hers and said she'd watch Emma for the evening. No problem. The truth was simpler and somehow harder to say out loud. He just needed 2 hours where nobody called him dad. 2 hours where he could eat a meal that didn't come from a microwave and remember what it felt like to be just Ethan, not Ethan, who does everything alone. The booth felt too big for one person. He'd requested it anyway, wanting the illusion of space, of not being cramped in at the bar where everyone could see you eating solo on a Friday night like some kind of cautionary tale. The menu sat unopened in front of him. He already knew what he wanted, the bolognese, same thing he'd ordered the 3 other times he'd managed to come here over the past 2 years. Creature of habit. Emma said he was boring. She was probably right. A burst of cold air swept through the restaurant as the door opened again. Ethan glanced up out of reflex, the way you do when you're eating alone and looking for distractions. A woman stepped inside, shaking rain from her coat with quick, irritated movements. Even from across the room, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone bracing for bad news. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back in a way that looked professional even when it was half ruined by weather. Her coat was expensive. He'd learned to spot these things after years of dropping Emma off at a school where some of the other parents drove cars that cost more than his annual salary. She moved to the host stand with the kind of stride that said she was used to people getting out of her way. Ethan looked back down at his menu, feeling vaguely guilty for staring. Not his business. He had his own evening to salvage. His own 2 hours of borrowed peace. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but as I explained, we're completely booked for the evening." The host's voice carried across the dining room, polite but firm. "We have a wait list, but it's running at least 90 minutes right now." 90 minutes! The woman's voice was lower than Ethan expected, rough around the edges with exhaustion. "You don't have anything? Not even at the bar?" "The bar is standing room only at the moment. I can put your name down." "No, thank you." She cut him off, not rudely exactly, but with the finality of someone who'd already moved on to her next problem. She turned toward the door, and Ethan caught a clearer look at her face. Makeup couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes. Her jaw was tight, like she was holding something back through sheer force of will. She looked, he thought, like he felt most days. The thought moved through him before he could stop it, and then his mouth was opening and words were coming out, and he was half standing from his booth like an idiot. "Excuse me." She stopped, one hand on the door. The host looked over, surprised. Several nearby diners glanced up from their plates. Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck but pushed forward anyway. "I have this booth. It's too big for me. You're welcome to share it, if you want." The woman stared at him. Not hostile exactly, but wary, calculating. Her eyes moved from his face to the booth to the door and back again, like she was running scenarios. "You don't have to," Ethan added quickly, sitting back down to seem less threatening or weird or whatever he was coming across as. "I just thought, you look like you've had a long day, and the booth's here. No pressure." The silence stretched out long enough that he regretted everything. This was why he didn't talk to people. This was why he stayed home with Emma and her endless questions about why clouds floated and whether dinosaurs would eat pizza. "Okay," the woman said finally. "Thank you." She crossed the restaurant with that same purposeful stride, water dripping from her coat hem. Up close, Ethan could see the strain in her expression more clearly, the tightness around her mouth, the way her eyes kept moving like she was tracking threats. She slid into the opposite side of the booth, setting her purse down with careful precision. "I'm Vanessa," she said. No last name, no handshake. Just the minimum required for two strangers sharing a table. Ethan, he pushed a menu toward her. They're good here. Pasta's better than the steak, if you ask me. She picked up the menu but didn't look at it. Instead, she studied him with an intensity that made him want to check if he had food on his shirt. Why did you do that? Do what? Offer your table to a stranger. Most people would have kept their heads down. Ethan shrugged, reaching for his water glass to give his hand something to do. You look tired. I've got space. Seemed stupid to waste it. That's it? No ulterior motive? What, like I'm going to try to sell you insurance halfway through dinner? He smiled a little, trying to lighten whatever weight she was carrying. I teach middle school science. My networking skills max out at parent-teacher conferences. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but a slight softening around the eyes. Science teacher. That explains the glasses. They're practical. They're dorky. Also practical. She did smile then, just barely, and opened the menu for real this time. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Maybe this wouldn't be completely awkward. Maybe two tired people could just share a meal and go their separate ways without it turning into a disaster. The waiter appeared, a young guy with slicked back hair who looked like he was working on an acting career between shifts. He took Vanessa's drink order, whiskey, neat, which surprised Ethan more than it should have, and disappeared again. Long day? Ethan asked, because the silence was starting to feel pointed. Long year. Vanessa set the menu down. Long 5 years, if I'm being honest. That's specific, huh? Career stuff, you wouldn't be interested. Try me. I've got 2 hours before I turn back into a pumpkin. She looked at him again with that assessing gaze, like she was deciding how much truth to hand over to a stranger in a restaurant booth. The waiter returned with her whiskey. She took a long sip before speaking. I run a company, she said carefully. Mid-sized tech firm. We do enterprise software solutions. Don't ask me to explain it because I'll bore you to death with jargon. The short version is, I've spent the last 5 years building something from the ground up, and most days it feels like I'm still running uphill in quicksand. Sounds stressful. That's a polite way of putting it. She swirled the whiskey in her glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Most people use words like intense or challenging or fast-paced. They mean the same thing. It eats your life if you let it. Ethan nodded. He knew that feeling from a different angle. The way single parenthood consumed everything until you forgot what your own interests used to be, what you did with free time before it became a myth. What about you? Vanessa asked, turning the questions back on him. What does a middle school science teacher do on a Friday night? I'm guessing this isn't your usual routine. No. Usually I'm home. He hesitated, then figured what the hell. She'd been honest with him. I have a daughter. She's 8. Normally we'd be watching some movie about talking animals or building a volcano for her science fair or, I don't know, whatever keeps her from getting bored and deciding to reorganize my kitchen cabinets by color. You let her reorganize your cabinets? I don't let her do anything. She just does it. Last month she alphabetized my spice rack because she said it was inefficient. Vanessa laughed, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded. She sounds like a handful. She's everything. The words came out softer than Ethan intended. He cleared his throat. Her mom's not in the picture, so it's just us. Has been for 6 years. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're good. Better than good most days. She's smart, funny, way too observant for her own good. I wouldn't trade it. He paused. But yeah, sometimes I need a night where I'm not explaining photosynthesis over chicken nuggets. The waiter returned and they ordered bolognese for Ethan, the salmon for Vanessa. When he left, the conversation settled into something easier. Less like an interview and more like an actual exchange between two people who happened to be sitting across from each other. They talked about inconsequential things at first. The rain, the restaurant's questionable playlist. Whether pineapple belonged on pizza, Vanessa said yes, Ethan said absolutely not, and they argued about it with the kind of mock seriousness that made the whole booth feel lighter. But underneath it, Ethan noticed things. The way Vanessa's shoulders gradually came down from where they'd been bunched near her ears. The way she started making eye contact instead of staring at her drink. The way her laugh, when it came, sounded surprised, like she'd forgotten she could make that sound. Can I ask you something? She said after the food arrived and they'd both eaten in companionable silence for a few minutes. Sure. Do you always do this? Invite strangers to share your table? Never. So why tonight? Ethan set his fork down, thinking about how to answer honestly without sounding like he was trying too hard. You look like you could use someone being decent to you. I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting. Most days I feel like I'm running on fumes, and the smallest thing, someone holding a door, a parent saying thank you after a conference instead of just complaining, it makes a difference. I figured maybe you needed a small thing to go right today. Vanessa went very still. For a moment, Ethan worried he'd overstepped, said too much, made this weird when it had been going well. Then she said quietly, I did. Need that. Thank you. They went back to eating, but something had shifted between them. The conversation moved deeper, not into personal history exactly, but into the kind of talk you have when you realize the person across from you gets it, gets the weight of responsibility, gets the loneliness of being the person who always has to have the answers. Vanessa talked about the pressure of running a company where 100 people depended on her decisions, where investors watched her every move, where one wrong quarter could mean layoffs and failure and public humiliation. She talked about board meetings that felt like combat, about fighting for respect in rooms full of men who assumed she'd gotten her position through luck or connections rather than merit. Ethan talked about parent-teacher conferences where mothers flirted with him because he was single and employed, about the guilt of working late when Emma needed help with homework, about the specific exhaustion of being the only person who could make every decision, big and small, that shaped a kid's life. Do you ever feel like you're failing? Vanessa asked. Like no matter how hard you work, you're not doing enough? Every single day, Ethan said. Emma asked me last week why I don't date. You know what I told her? That I was too busy. She's 8 and she saw right through it. She said, "You're scared, Dad." And she was right. Scared of what? Letting someone in and having them leave. Again. He hadn't meant to say that part. It hung in the air between them, too raw, too honest for a stranger in a restaurant. But Vanessa just nodded. I get that. I was engaged once. He wanted me to choose between him and my career like they were equivalent. Like years of work and building something meaningful was the same as his ego needing me to be less than I am. What did you choose? The career, obviously. She took another sip of whiskey. He said I'd regret it, said I'd end up alone, married to my company, wondering what could have been. She paused. Some days I think he was right. He wasn't, Ethan said firmly. You know how I know? Because you're here. You walked into a restaurant after what I'm guessing was a brutal day, and you could have just left when they said no tables. But you stayed. You took a chance on sharing space with a stranger. That's not someone who's given up on connection. Vanessa met his eyes. Hers were darker than he'd first thought, brown with flecks of gold that caught the candlelight. She looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was real or if this whole conversation was something she'd imagined. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone who'd spend the whole meal trying to impress me, or hitting on me, or She stopped mid-sentence, her gaze shifting to something over Ethan's shoulder. Her entire body went rigid. The warmth drained from her expression, replaced by something cold and guarded. Vanessa. The voice came from behind Ethan, smooth and sharp at the same time, like expensive cologne with an edge. What a surprise! Ethan turned. A man stood beside their booth, tall and angular in a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. His hair was styled with the kind of precision that required product and time, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Lucas? Vanessa's voice had gone flat. What are you doing here? Having dinner with clients. Saw you from across the room and thought I'd say hello. His eyes cut to Ethan, dismissive and calculating all at once. Didn't realize you were entertaining. The word landed like an insult. Ethan felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. He'd dealt with enough difficult parents to recognize a power play when he saw one. We're having dinner, Vanessa said, each word clipped. You should get back to your clients. In a minute. Lucas slid into the booth next to Vanessa without asking, crowding her toward the wall. She stiffened but didn't move away, and Ethan saw something flash across her face. Not fear exactly, but a deep weariness, like this was a fight she'd had too many times to count. I don't think there's room, Ethan started. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Lucas extended a hand across the table, all false politeness. Lucas Grant. VP of Strategic Development at Vanguard Industries. Ethan shook his hand because refusing would make this worse. Ethan Brooks. And what is it you do, Ethan? I teach science. A teacher. Lucas said it the way someone might say a janitor or unemployed. That's admirable. Public service and all that. He turned to Vanessa. I have to say, this is unexpected. I thought you'd sworn off dating after us. We're not dating, Vanessa said. Ethan was kind enough to share his table, that's all. Kind enough, right. Lucas's smile sharpened. You know what, that is kind. Because looking around this place, I'm seeing a lot of people who probably also needed tables. But Ethan here chose you specifically. Makes you wonder about his motives, doesn't it? My motive was that she looked tired and the booth was empty, Ethan said, keeping his voice level. Nothing more complicated than that. Nothing more complicated, sure. Lucas leaned back, draping his arm across the booth behind Vanessa in a gesture that looked casual, but clearly wasn't. Here's the thing, though. Vanessa has a tendency to attract, let's call them opportunists. People who see what she's built and think maybe some of that success might rub off on them. I'd hate to see her taken advantage of by someone who's just looking for, Lucas, stop. Vanessa's voice cut through his monologue, sharp and tired. Just stop. You don't get to do this. Do what? Look out for you? We were together for 3 years, Vanessa. I think I've earned the right to make sure you're okay. You ended that right when you gave me an ultimatum, and then spent 6 months telling anyone who'd listen that I was a cold, ambitious bitch who cared more about spreadsheets than people. The words came out hard and bitter, and Ethan saw Lucas's expression flicker, just for a second, with something that might have been shame before it settled back into smug superiority. I was hurt, Lucas said. People say things when they're hurt, but I'm past that now. I've moved on. Clearly you haven't. If you're spending Friday night with, he gestured vaguely at Ethan, with someone who treats me like a person instead of a trophy or a disappointment, Vanessa finished. Yeah, crazy, right? The tension at the table was thick enough to cut. Other diners were starting to notice, conversations at nearby tables dropping to murmurs as people tried to eavesdrop without being obvious about it. Lucas's jaw tightened. You're making a scene. No, Ethan said quietly. You're making a scene, and you're making the lady uncomfortable. So maybe it's time for you to head back to your clients like she suggested. Lucas's attention swung back to Ethan, and something dangerous flickered in his expression. I'm sorry, did I ask for your input? This is between me and Vanessa. Doesn't seem like she wants it to be between you and her, Ethan said. Seems like she'd prefer you to leave. Is that what this is? Lucas laughed, cold and sharp. You think you're her white knight, riding in to save her from the big bad ex? Let me tell you something about Vanessa. She doesn't need saving. She's perfectly capable of destroying things all by herself. Relationships, trust, anything that requires her to be vulnerable for 5 seconds. Get out. Vanessa's voice was low, but shaking with anger. Get out of this booth and leave me alone, Lucas. I mean it. Or what? You'll call security? Make another scene? Go ahead. I'm sure your board would love to read about the CEO of Reed Technologies having a meltdown in a public restaurant because she couldn't handle seeing her ex. The lady asked you to leave, Ethan said, and this time his voice was harder, the kind of tone he used with students who'd pushed too far and needed to understand the line had been crossed. You need to respect that. Lucas turned to him slowly, and Ethan could see the calculation happening. The assessment of whether a middle school teacher was worth whatever confrontation was building. You know what? Fine. Lucas stood up, adjusting his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Enjoy your dinner, both of you. Vanessa, when you're done slumming it with public sector employees, give me a call. We should talk about the Marchfield contract. I heard some interesting things from their team. He walked away before Vanessa could respond, threading back through the restaurant toward a table in the far corner where 3 men in similar suits watched with undisguised interest. The silence he left behind felt heavy and wrong. Vanessa sat frozen, staring at the table like she could burn a hole through it with her eyes. Her hands were clenched into fists on the tablecloth, knuckles white. Are you okay? Ethan asked. She didn't answer for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her expression was carefully blank, the warmth and openness from earlier completely gone. I should go, she said. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She grabbed her purse, movements jerky and rushed. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have stayed. Vanessa, thank you for the table and for being decent, but I need to leave. She was halfway out of the booth before Ethan could process what was happening. He watched her navigate through the restaurant, head down, moving fast like she was being chased. He sat there for a minute, his dinner half-eaten and going cold, trying to understand what had just happened. The encounter with Lucas played back through his mind. The casual cruelty, the possessiveness disguised as concern, the way he'd made Vanessa shrink into herself after she'd finally started to relax. The waiter appeared, looking uncertain. Is everything all right, sir? The lady. She had to go, Ethan said. Can I get the check? For both meals. He paid and left, stepping out into the rain that had softened to a steady drizzle. The street was slick and mostly empty, the Friday night crowd having found their destinations or given up and gone home. Ethan stood under the awning trying to decide what to do. Go home, probably. This wasn't his problem. Vanessa was a stranger who'd shared his table for an hour, and whatever history she had with Lucas wasn't his business. But something kept him rooted there, staring out at the wet pavement and thinking about the way she'd looked when Lucas sat down, that bone-deep exhaustion, that resignation. Like she'd been fighting the same battle for years and didn't have the energy anymore. He was about to head toward his car when he saw her. She was standing about half a block down, under the awning of a closed boutique, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and even from a distance, Ethan could see the tension in her posture. He shouldn't. He should absolutely not walk down there and insert himself into whatever was happening in her life. He started walking anyway. As he got closer, he could hear fragments of her conversation, her voice tight with frustration. Don't care what he said, Jennifer. He doesn't get to do this. I know, but... She broke off, listening, then laughed bitterly. No, I'm not going back in there. I'll grab something at home. Yeah, Monday. We'll deal with it Monday. She ended the call and stood there staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. Vanessa. She spun around, startled, and for a second Ethan saw fear flash across her face before recognition set in. Ethan, what are you... You should be inside. I left. Didn't feel right to keep eating after... He gestured vaguely. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're standing in the rain. Barely raining now. You're shaking. She looked down at her hands like she'd just noticed they were trembling. I'm fine, she repeated, but it sounded hollow even to Ethan's ears. Look, I don't know what happened back there, and you don't owe me an explanation, Ethan said. But that guy, Lucas, he was out of line, and you don't have to pretend it didn't bother you. Of course it bothered me. The words burst out sharp and angry. He does this. Every time I think I'm past it, past him, he shows up and reminds me why I'm better off alone. Why letting anyone in is just setting myself up to... She stopped, closing her eyes. Sorry, that's not your problem. Maybe not. But I offered you a table because you looked like you could use someone being decent to you, remember? That offer still stands, just in a different context. She opened her eyes, studying him with that same intense assessment from earlier. Why are you being so nice to me? Because someone should be. And because... He hesitated, then figured he might as well be honest. Because I know what it's like to feel like you're carrying everything alone. And sometimes the smallest gesture from someone who doesn't want anything from you can be the thing that keeps you going. Vanessa's expression cracked, just slightly. Not tears, but something close. A vulnerability she'd been fighting to keep locked down. He's right, you know, what he said in there. I am married to my company. I do care more about success than relationships. That's why we didn't work. Or maybe you cared about success because he made it impossible to care about both, Ethan said. Sounds like he wanted you small, manageable. And when you refused to be those things, he decided it was your fault instead of his. She stared at him. You got all that from 5 minutes of watching him be an asshole? I teach middle school. I've seen every kind of bully there is. He's just a grown-up version with better vocabulary. That got a small, surprised laugh from her. You're not wrong. Come on, Ethan said, making a decision. There's a coffee place 2 blocks over. Let me buy you something warm, and then I'll make sure you get to your car safely. No strings, no expectations. Just Let someone do something nice for you tonight that isn't attached to an agenda. Vanessa looked like she wanted to argue. Then she looked back toward Marcello's, where Lucas was probably still holding court with his clients, and something in her seemed to give. "Okay," she said. "Coffee. But I'm paying." "Deal." They walked together through the drizzle, not talking, just moving through the quiet city streets. The coffee shop was warm and almost empty, just a college student with headphones in and a barista who looked half asleep behind the counter. Ethan ordered black coffee. Vanessa got something elaborate with caramel that she immediately looked embarrassed about. "It's my guilty pleasure," she admitted, clutching the cup like a lifeline. "I spend all day making decisions that affect hundreds of people. And then I come to places like this and can't decide between caramel or vanilla. That's called being human," Ethan said. They sat at a small table by the window, watching the occasional car pass by outside. "You're allowed to have preferences that don't align with your CEO image. Are you always this annoyingly insightful?" "Only on Fridays." She smiled into her coffee, and Ethan felt that same loosening in his chest from earlier. Like maybe this bizarre evening could still end on something resembling a good note. They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting through safer topics now, favorite books, terrible movies they'd loved as kids, the specific weirdness of their respective jobs. Vanessa told him about a board meeting where she'd had to explain basic software functionality to a room full of investors who thought the cloud was literal weather. Ethan told her about the time a student brought a live snake to class for show and tell without telling anyone, and it had escaped into the ventilation system. "They found it 3 weeks later in the principal's office," he said. "She never forgave me." "That wasn't your fault." "Try telling her that. I'm pretty sure I'm still on a list somewhere." They laughed together, and for those few minutes, the weight of everything else fell away. They were just two tired people sharing stories over coffee, finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. Eventually, though, reality crept back in. Vanessa checked her phone and winced at the time. "I should go," she said, but this time it didn't sound like running, just practical. "Early morning tomorrow, conference call with Singapore." "On a Saturday?" "Welcome to the glamorous life of a CEO." They walked to the parking garage together, the rain having stopped completely now. The city smelled clean and new, like the storm had washed something away. At her car, a sleek silver sedan that probably cost more than Ethan made in 2 years, she turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, "for the table, and for not letting me disappear after Lucas showed up. For all of it." "You don't have to thank me for basic human decency. In my world, basic human decency is rarer than you'd think." She paused, then pulled out her phone. Would it be weird if I asked for your number?" "Not for anything. I mean, It's not weird," Ethan said, pulling out his own phone. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling with screens in the dim garage lighting. When it was done, Vanessa looked at her phone like she wasn't quite sure what she'd just agreed to. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Exchange numbers with men I meet in restaurants. I don't usually offer my table to strangers. Guess we're both making exceptions tonight." She smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and made her look younger, less burdened. "Good night, Ethan Brooks." "Good night, Vanessa Reed." He watched her get in her car and pull away, taillights disappearing into the garage exit. Then he stood there for a minute in the concrete silence, trying to process the evening that had somehow turned from a quiet solo dinner into something he couldn't quite name. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma's asleep. Take your time." Ethan smiled and headed to his own car, thinking about his daughter and wondering what she'd say when he tried to explain why he looked different somehow, lighter, even though nothing had really changed. Except something had changed. He'd taken a chance on kindness, and a stranger had taken a chance on trusting him, and somewhere in the space between those two gestures, they'd both found something they didn't know they needed. He drove home through empty streets, the radio playing soft jazz, his mind replaying moments from the evening. Vanessa's laugh, the way she'd looked at him when he stood up to Lucas, the vulnerability in her voice when she admitted she was tired of being alone. And underneath it all, the quiet knowledge that sometimes the smallest acts, offering a table, sharing a conversation, refusing to let cruelty go unchallenged, could open doors you didn't even know were there. Tomorrow he'd be dad again, making pancakes and answering questions about whether clouds had feelings. But tonight, For a few hours, he'd been Ethan, and that had been enough. More than enough. It had been exactly what he needed. Ethan didn't hear from Vanessa for 3 days, and he told himself that was fine. Expected, even. People exchanged numbers all the time and never used them. It was a polite gesture, a way to close out an evening that had gotten strange and intense in ways neither of them had planned for. She was a CEO with a company to run and problems he couldn't begin to understand. He was a single dad with a stack of lab reports to grade and a daughter who'd decided she wanted to learn how to code and needed his help. Setting up a laptop she barely knew how to use. Their worlds didn't overlap. Friday night had been an anomaly, a brief intersection that was never meant to become anything more. He repeated this to himself Monday morning while Emma asked why he kept checking his phone during breakfast. He repeated it Monday afternoon when his lunch break stretched long because he'd finished eating and still had 20 minutes before fifth period. He repeated it Monday evening when Emma was in bed and the house was quiet and he found himself staring at Vanessa's contact information, wondering if it would be weird to send a text just to say hello. It would be weird. Definitely weird. He set the phone down and picked up a student essay about photosynthesis that somehow included 3 paragraphs about zombies. His phone buzzed. Ethan grabbed it so fast he nearly knocked over his coffee. The message was from an unknown number, but he knew before opening it who it would be. Is this still Ethan? Or did I get a wrong number from a teacher who was just being polite? He stared at the screen, reading it twice to make sure he wasn't imagining things. Then he typed back, deleted it, typed something else, deleted that too. Finally settled on simple. Still me. How was Singapore? The response came quickly, like she'd been waiting. Exhausting. 7 hours of people arguing about API integration like it's a matter of life and death. How was middle school? Kid brought a hamster to class. It escaped. We spent 40 minutes searching for it. Still haven't found it. That's either very concerning or very funny. Both. Mostly concerning. The principal is going to kill me. Twice in 1 year? You're building quite a record. He smiled at his phone like an idiot, sitting alone in his living room at 9:30 on a Monday night. Then he realized he was smiling at his phone and felt ridiculous, and kept smiling anyway. They texted back and forth for another 20 minutes, the conversation light and easy in a way that felt natural despite everything. Vanessa told him about the passive-aggressive email war she was having with a board member who thought they should pivot to cryptocurrency. Ethan told her about the parent who'd accused him of giving her son a B- because of a personal vendetta. Do you have a personal vendetta against a 13-year-old? Vanessa asked. Obviously. I'm very petty. Also, he didn't turn in 3 assignments and failed the midterm. Minor details. Completely irrelevant to my campaign of targeted harassment. He could almost hear her laugh through the screen. The conversation wound down naturally, both of them having early mornings and responsibilities that couldn't be ignored. But before she signed off, Vanessa sent one more message. Thank you for Friday. I keep meaning to say that properly. You didn't have to do any of what you did, and it meant more than you probably realize. Ethan read it 3 times, trying to figure out how to respond in a way that was honest without being too much. Finally, he went with instinct. You don't have to keep thanking me. But if you ever need someone to share a table with again, I know a guy. Yeah? What's he like? Dorky glasses, questionable taste in restaurants, moderate hamster wrangling skills. Sounds promising. I'll keep him in mind. That became the pattern over the next 2 weeks. Text messages at odd hours, never planned, always a surprise. Vanessa would send him something at 6 in the morning before a board meeting, usually sarcastic commentary about whatever corporate nonsense she was dealing with. Ethan would respond during his lunch break or after Emma went to bed, sharing the small absurdities of his own day. They didn't talk about Lucas. They didn't talk about the intensity of that night at Marcello's or what it meant that they were still in contact. They just talked, the way 2 people might if they'd stumbled into an unexpected friendship and were both cautiously feeling out its boundaries. On Thursday of the second week, Vanessa called instead of texting. Ethan was in the middle of helping Emma with her math homework when his phone lit up, and he nearly dropped it in his surprise. I have to take this, he told Emma. Keep working on number 7. Is it a girl? Emma asked, way too observant for her own good. It's a work thing. You're a bad liar, Dad. He escaped to the kitchen before she could interrogate him further. Hello? Hi. Is this a bad time? Vanessa's voice was different over the phone, warmer, more immediate than text allowed. No, I mean, yes, kind of, but it's fine. What's up? I'm sitting in my car outside my office building having what I think might be a minor crisis. And you were the only person I could think of who wouldn't immediately try to solve it or tell me I'm being dramatic. Ethan leaned against the counter, processing that. Okay, tell me about the minor crisis. I just got out of a meeting where I spent 90 minutes defending a decision I made 6 months ago that has proven to be objectively correct by every metric we have. And they still questioned it, still made me justify it, still implied that maybe I'd gotten lucky rather than being competent. She paused, and he heard her take a breath. And I'm so tired, Ethan. I'm tired of fighting for every inch of respect. I'm tired of being twice as prepared as anyone else in the room and still having to prove I belong there. I'm tired of winning and still feeling like I'm losing. The exhaustion in her voice was so familiar it hurt. Ethan had felt that same bone-deep weariness plenty of times, after parent conferences where people questioned his teaching methods, after budget meetings where they cut funding and expected him to do more with less, after nights when Emma asked why her mom left, and he had to find answers that wouldn't break her heart. You're not being dramatic, he said quietly. You're being human. And anyone who can't see that you've earned your place in that room is either blind or threatened or both. How do you do this? Vanessa asked. Stay optimistic when everything feels like pushing a boulder uphill? Who says I'm optimistic? Most days I'm just stubborn. There's a difference. That got a small laugh from her. Stubborn? Yeah, I can work with stubborn. Also, for what it's worth, you called me. Out of everyone you know, all your colleagues and board members and whoever else, you called a middle school science teacher you met 2 weeks ago. That should tell you something about the people in your regular life. Silence on the other end. Then, softer. That's a depressing observation. But accurate? But accurate, she admitted. I don't have a lot of people I can just talk to. Everyone wants something, advice, approval, access, leverage. You're the first person in a long time who's just listened. Then I'm glad you called. They talked for another 30 minutes. Vanessa stayed in her car, and Ethan stayed in his kitchen, and they talked about nothing and everything, work stress and impossible expectations, and the specific loneliness of being the person everyone else leaned on with no one to lean on yourself. Eventually, Emma appeared in the doorway, making exaggerated pointing gestures at her unfinished homework. Ethan mouthed 5 minutes, and she rolled her eyes dramatically before disappearing back to the dining room. I should let you go, Vanessa said, picking up on his distraction. Thank you for this. For listening. Any time. I mean that. I know you do. That's what makes you dangerous. Dangerous how? You make me think I could trust people again. That's a risky proposition for someone like me. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he settled for honesty. Maybe some risks are worth taking. Maybe, Vanessa said, but she didn't sound convinced. After they hung up, Ethan stood in his kitchen for a minute, staring at his phone and trying to understand what was happening between them. It felt like more than friendship, but less than anything definable. A connection that existed in the spaces between their regular lives, sustained by text messages and late-night phone calls, and the shared understanding of what it meant to carry weight alone. Dad? Emma called from the other room. Are you helping me, or are you just going to stand there being weird? I'm helping, he called back, pocketing his phone. And I'm not being weird. You're being so weird. She wasn't wrong. The next Friday, Vanessa asked if he wanted to meet for coffee. Not dinner, not anything formal, just coffee at the same place they'd gone to after the Marcello's disaster. Neutral territory, low stakes. Ethan said yes before his brain could catch up and remind him of all the reasons this was complicated. He told Emma he was meeting a friend. She gave him the same knowing look she'd been giving him all week, the one that said she saw right through him and was choosing to let him have his secrets for now. Be back by 9, she said, like she was the parent. I'm the adult here. Someone has to be. He arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, which was stupid and obvious, and he did it anyway. Ordered his black coffee and sat at the same table by the window where they'd talked before, watching the street and trying not to look like someone waiting for something important. Vanessa arrived exactly on time, which somehow didn't surprise him. She looked different than she had at Marcello's, more put together, the armor of professional competence firmly in place. Her hair was perfect. Her coat was perfect. Everything about her said successful CEO who had her life completely under control. But when she sat down across from him and smiled, he saw the exhaustion still there underneath it all, the careful construction that took effort to maintain. "Hi," she said. "Hi yourself. How was your week?" "Long. Yours?" "Found the hamster. It was living in the ceiling tiles above the gym. Facilities is furious with me." "So you're at 3 incidents now. Impressive." "I'm going for a record." They fell into easy conversation, the awkwardness of a deliberate meeting dissolving into the familiar rhythm they'd found through texts and phone calls. Vanessa told him about the board meeting where she'd finally shut down the cryptocurrency guy by presenting 6 months of research showing why it was a terrible idea. Ethan told her about the student who'd turned in a lab report written entirely in memes and somehow still managed to demonstrate a solid understanding of cellular respiration. "I didn't know whether to give him an A or detention," Ethan said. "Both. Definitely both." An hour passed without either of them noticing. Then another. The coffee shop started filling up with the dinner crowd, college students claiming tables for study sessions, couples on casual dates. Ethan and Vanessa stayed at their window table, the conversation ranging through topics that felt both random and deeply personal. Vanessa talked about her parents, who'd wanted her to be a lawyer and still didn't quite understand what she did for a living. Ethan talked about his mom, who'd passed 3 years ago and never got to see Emma grow into the smart, funny kid she'd become. They talked about the weight of expectation, the fear of failure, the specific anxiety of being responsible for other people's livelihoods or futures or happiness. "Do you ever wish you could just walk away?" Vanessa asked. "From all of it. Start over somewhere no one knows you." "All the time," Ethan admitted. "Except I can't, because Emma needs stability. She needs her school and her friends and the life we've built. So I stay and I grade papers, and I deal with administrators who think teaching is easy and parents who think I'm personally responsible for their kids' mediocrity." "That sounds exhausting." "It is. But then Emma will come home excited about some book she read or some project she wants to try, and she'll look at me like I hung the moon because I helped her figure out a math problem, and that makes it worth it." He paused. "What about you? Do you ever want to walk away?" Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, turning her coffee cup in slow circles on the table. "Every board meeting, every time Lucas sends me one of his passive-aggressive emails about company strategy. Every time I look at my calendar and realize I haven't had a full day off in 8 months." She looked up at him. "But I can't. Because 100 people depend on the company for their paychecks. Because walking away would mean admitting that maybe Lucas was right, that I can't handle it, that I'm not strong enough." Her voice went harder. "And I will never give him that satisfaction." "So you're staying out of spite." Spite is an underrated motivator. "Can't argue with that." They smiled at each other across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of the parallel tracks they were running on, the similar weight they carried in completely different contexts. "Can I ask you something personal?" Vanessa said. "You just told me you're running a company partially out of spite. I think we're past polite boundaries." "Fair point." She took a breath. "Why did Emma's mom leave?" Ethan had known the question would come eventually. It always did. People asked out of curiosity or concern, or sometimes just because they couldn't help themselves. Usually he gave them the sanitized version. "It didn't work out," or "we wanted different things." Simple explanations that didn't require follow-up. But Vanessa had been honest with him, about Lucas, about her exhaustion, about the loneliness of her position. He owed her the same honesty. "She didn't want to be a mother," he said simply. "That's the short version. The longer version is that we were young and stupid and thought a baby would fix things that were already broken. It didn't. Emma was 6 months old when Sarah left, said she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't handle the responsibility, couldn't be what Emma needed. She signed over custody and moved to Portland. We haven't heard from her in 6 years. That's awful." "Yeah, it is." Ethan stared at his coffee, the old anger and hurt rising up the way it always did when he told this story. "The worst part is Emma doesn't remember her. She knows she has a mother somewhere, but it's abstract, theoretical. And I don't know if that's better or worse than if she remembered and had to deal with feeling abandoned." "You've never told her the real story? How do you tell an 8-year-old that her mother chose to leave, that she wasn't enough to make her stay?" He shook his head. "I tell her that sometimes people aren't ready to be parents." that her mom had to figure out her own life, that it wasn't Emma's fault. And someday I'll tell her the whole truth, but not yet. Not when she still believes people are basically good. Vanessa reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, barely contact, but it sent a shock of awareness through him that he wasn't prepared for. "You're a good father," she said quietly. "Emma's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her. She saved me in a lot of ways. Gave me something to focus on besides feeling sorry for myself." They sat like that for a moment, her hand on his, the coffee shop noise fading into background static. Then Vanessa pulled back, looking flustered in a way he'd never seen her before. "Sorry, I shouldn't have—" "It's fine," Ethan said quickly. "Really, it's fine." But it wasn't fine, not in the way that word usually meant, because something had just happened that neither of them wanted to acknowledge directly. A line had been approached, if not quite crossed. A possibility opened up that changed the nature of whatever this was between them. Vanessa checked her phone, and Ethan saw her expression shift into something more guarded. "I should probably head out. Early morning tomorrow. Saturday conference calls? Welcome to my life." They walked out together, the evening air cool and crisp after the warmth of the coffee shop. The street was busy with Friday night traffic, people heading to dinner or bars or wherever people went when they had social lives. At her car, Vanessa turned to face him. "Can I ask you something else?" "Sure." "Why are you doing this? Meeting me for coffee, answering my calls, listening to me complain about my job? You barely know me." Ethan thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated and simple at the same time. "Because you remind me that there are other people out there fighting the same fight I am," he said. "Different context, same exhaustion. And because, I don't know, you're easy to talk to. You don't want anything from me except conversation. That's rare." "It's rare for me too," Vanessa said. "The not wanting anything part. Usually everyone wants something." "What does Lucas want?" The question came out before Ethan could stop it. Vanessa stiffened, her expression closing off. "Why are you asking about Lucas?" "Because he sent you 3 emails this week. I saw the notifications when you checked your phone inside. And because every time his name comes up, you look like you're preparing for battle." Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed, leaning back against her car. "Lucas wants me to fail, or succeed in a way that proves he was right to give me ultimatums. Either option works for him." She paused. "He's at Vanguard now, and they're bidding against us for a major contract with Marchfield Industries. It's a big deal, 7 figures, potential for ongoing work, the kind of account that could define the next 2 years for either company. And he's using your history to mess with you. He's using everything. Sends me friendly emails about how we should collaborate. Calls mutual contacts to ask about my stability as a CEO. Shows up at industry events and makes sure everyone sees us talking. Creates this narrative that we're still connected, that maybe I'm not over him, that my judgment might be compromised. That's manipulative as hell. That's Lucas." She looked at Ethan. "And the worst part is it's working. I'm second-guessing every decision related to this contract. Wondering if I'm being strategic or just trying to beat him. Worrying that even if we win, people will think it's because of some personal vendetta rather than the quality of our proposal. Or," Ethan said carefully, "you could win because you're better, because your company does good work, because you've spent 5 years building something solid, and Lucas is just a guy with a fancy title and a talent for psychological warfare. You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You do the work, you make the best pitch you can. You let the results speak for themselves. And if Lucas wants to make it personal, that's his problem, not yours." Vanessa studied him with that intense gaze that always made him feel like she was trying to figure out if he was real. "How are you this well-adjusted? Most people have more baggage." "Who says I'm well-adjusted? I'm a single dad who stress bakes at midnight and has full conversations with a hamster I know is living in my school's ceiling. I'm a disaster. I'm just a disaster who's had enough therapy to fake competence." That surprised a laugh out of her. "You stress bake?" "Cookies mostly. Sometimes bread if I'm really anxious." "What's your anxious tell right now?" "Right now I'm thinking about that sourdough starter in my fridge and wondering if I have enough flour at home." She smiled, and it was genuine, not the professional mask or the tired resignation, but something real and unguarded. "You're something else, Ethan Brooks." "Is that good or bad?" "I'm still figuring that out." They stood there in the parking lot, the space between them charged with something neither wanted to name. Ethan knew he should say goodnight, get in his car, go home to Emma. Keep this thing, whatever it was, in the safe category of friendship that didn't threaten to complicate either of their already complicated lives. Instead, he said, "Do you want to do this again?" The coffee thing. Maybe make it a regular Friday occurrence. Vanessa hesitated, and in that hesitation, Ethan saw her working through the same calculation he was, the risk assessment, the potential consequences, the question of whether this was smart or dangerous or both. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." "Yeah? Yeah, same time next week?" "It's a date." The word hung in the air between them, accidental and loaded. Ethan immediately wanted to take it back, rephrase it, clarify that he meant it colloquially, not literally. But Vanessa just smiled, something soft and uncertain in her expression. "Okay," she said. "It's a date." She got in her car and drove away, and Ethan stood there watching her taillights disappear like he had after that first night at Marcello's. Except this time felt different. This time felt like the beginning of something rather than the end. His phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "You're late. Also, I ordered pizza. You're paying." He texted back. "Be home in 15. Save me a slice." "Already ate it." "Sorry, not sorry. Already ate." Ethan smiled and got in his car. The drive home felt shorter than usual, his mind replaying the evening. The way Vanessa had reached for his hand, the honesty in her voice when she talked about Lucas, the small smile when he'd accidentally called it a date. He was in trouble. That much was clear. Because somewhere between offering a stranger his table and standing in a parking lot making plans for next Friday, he'd started to care about Vanessa Reed in a way that went beyond friendly concern. And based on the way she'd looked at him tonight, she was feeling something similar, which meant they were both in trouble. Emma was waiting when he got home, sprawled on the couch with her laptop and the demolished remains of a pizza box. She looked up when he walked in, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "You look weird," she announced. "Thanks. You look like you ate an entire pizza by yourself." "I left you one slice. It's in the kitchen." She closed her laptop. "So who is she?" "Who's who?" "The girl you keep texting, the one you met for coffee tonight." "Don't even try to lie, Dad. You're terrible at it." Ethan sank into the armchair across from her, too tired to maintain the pretense. "Her name is Vanessa. I met her a few weeks ago. We're friends." "Just friends?" "Yes, just friends." Emma gave him a look that was way too knowing for an 8-year-old. "You like her." "I like a lot of people." "You like her. It's obvious. You keep smiling at your phone." "I don't—" He stopped. "Do I really?" "All the time. It's gross." She paused, "but also kind of nice. You seem happier." That caught him off guard. "I'm happy. I've always been happy. Your dad happy. Like, you're good at being my dad and you love me and stuff. But you're not you happy. Not like how you get when you're baking or reading those science journals you think I don't know about. You've been more you lately." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. The observation was too accurate, too mature. Too much evidence that his daughter saw more than he gave her credit for. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Because she's fancy?" "What makes you think she's fancy?" "Dad, you wore your nice shirt tonight, the one you save for parent conferences. That means you're trying to impress someone, which means she's probably fancy." "She runs a company, so yeah, I guess she's fancy. But that's not what makes it complicated." "Then what does?" How to explain this to an 8-year-old? How to articulate the fear of letting someone in when the last person he'd let in had walked away? How to describe the careful balance between wanting connection and protecting the life he'd built for Emma? "Sometimes two people can like each other, but their lives don't fit together easily," he said. "She has a really demanding job. I have you and work and a lot of responsibilities. It's hard to make room for something new when you're already juggling so much." Emma considered this, her expression serious. "But you like her." "Yeah, I like her." "And she likes you?" "I think so. Maybe." "Then you should figure it out. Because you deserve to be happy. The you kind of happy, not just the dad kind." She said it with such certainty, such simple logic, that Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. 8 years old and already wiser than him about the important things. "When did you get so smart?" he asked. "I've always been smart. You just don't listen." She grabbed her laptop. I'm going to bed. Don't stay up too late thinking about your fancy girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. Yet, Emma called back as she headed upstairs. Ethan sat alone in the living room, listening to Emma move around in her bedroom above him. He pulled out his phone and looked at his last exchange with Vanessa, the confirmation of next Friday's coffee date. He should probably be more cautious, should probably think this through more carefully, should probably consider all the ways this could go wrong and hurt both of them. Instead, he sent her a text. Made it home. Emma ate all the pizza and interrogated me about where I was. She says you're fancy. The response came a minute later. Is that a problem? Not for me. But she also says I've been smiling at my phone a lot lately. Have you? Ethan stared at the question, the cursor blinking while he tried to figure out how honest to be. Finally, he went with the truth. Yeah, I have. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When the message finally came through, it was simple. Me too. Ethan read it twice, then set his phone down and allowed himself to feel the warmth spreading through his chest. The dangerous, complicated, absolutely foolish warmth of possibility. They were both in trouble. But maybe, just maybe, it was the kind of trouble worth diving into. The third Friday arrived with the kind of anticipation that made Ethan feel like a teenager again, which was both thrilling and mildly embarrassing for a 32-year-old man with a mortgage and a kid. He'd caught himself checking his reflection twice before leaving the house, and Emma had noticed, naturally, because Emma noticed everything. You're wearing the nice shirt again, she'd said from the doorway of his bedroom, arms crossed in a pose she'd definitely stolen from him. It's just a shirt. It's the fancy one, the one that needs ironing. All shirts need ironing. Not the ones you usually wear. She'd grinned. Tell Vanessa I said hi. I'm not. We're just getting coffee. Uh-huh. Have fun on your not date. Now he was sitting at their usual table, watching the door and trying not to look like he was watching the door. The coffee shop was busier than last week, filled with students cramming for midterms, and a few couples who looked like they were on actual dates, not the weird, undefined thing he and Vanessa had going. She arrived 5 minutes late, looking harried in a way that was becoming familiar. Her hair was pulled back but coming loose, and she had her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in rapid-fire sentences that Ethan couldn't quite make out. She saw him, held up one finger in a "give me a minute" gesture, and paced near the door while finishing her call. When she finally hung up and made her way to the table, she looked exhausted. Sorry, she said, dropping into the chair across from him. Crisis at work. Well, not a real crisis, but a situation that people are treating like a crisis, which somehow makes it my problem. Want to talk about it? Not really. I want to drink coffee and talk about something that isn't code deployment or client negotiations or Lucas Grant's latest attempt to undermine me. She paused. Although if I'm being honest, it's mostly about Lucas Grant. What did he do now? Vanessa rubbed her temples, the gesture speaking to a headache that had probably been building for hours. He scheduled a meeting with Marchfield for Monday, same day as ours. Showed up at their office this morning to deliver a revised proposal in person, made a big production of it. Now they're comparing our pitches side by side, and every decision I make looks reactive instead of strategic. That's deliberate. Of course it's deliberate. Everything Lucas does is deliberate. He knows exactly how to get under my skin, how to make me second-guess myself. And the worst part is it's working. She looked up at Ethan. I spent 2 hours this afternoon rewriting sections of our proposal that were already good, changed things that didn't need changing. My team could tell I was spiraling, and that makes me look weak, which is exactly what he wants. Ethan wanted to offer reassurance, but platitudes felt cheap. Instead, he asked, "What would you tell one of your employees if they came to you with this problem?" I'd tell them to trust their work and ignore the noise. So, why can't you do that? Because it's different when it's me. When it's personal. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Lucas and I were together for 3 years. I know how he thinks. I know what he's going to do before he does it. And he knows the same about me. It's like playing chess against someone who can read your mind. Then stop playing his game, Ethan said. Make your own moves. Present the best proposal you can, and let it stand on its merit. If Marchfield chooses Vanguard, it's because of the work, not because Lucas outmaneuvered you in some psychological chess match. Vanessa looked at him for a long moment. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. But it is simple. You're letting him take up space in your head that he doesn't deserve. Every minute you spend thinking about what Lucas is doing is a minute you're not spending on making your own pitch better. When did you get so wise about corporate strategy? I teach 13-year-olds. Same principles apply. Kids will push your buttons if you let them. The trick is not letting them. She smiled, just a little. So you're saying Lucas is basically a 13-year-old? Emotionally, probably. That got a real laugh from her, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. The barista called out her order. She'd texted ahead this time, and Ethan retrieved it while she checked her phone, scrolling through what looked like an endless string of emails. You're allowed to take a break, he said, setting the cup in front of her. I know, there's this thing on Tuesday that I need to... She stopped herself, set the phone face down on the table. Sorry, you're right. I'm here. I'm present. How's the proposal actually looking, objectively? It's good, really good. We've got competitive pricing, a better implementation timeline, and our customer retention rates blow Vanguards out of the water. On paper, we should win this. But Lucas has relationships. He's been schmoozing with the Marchfield executives for months, probably since before the RFP even went out. That matters in this industry. People want to work with people they like, and Lucas is very good at being likable when he wants to be. Are you likable? Vanessa snorted. Not particularly. I'm competent. I'm professional. I deliver results. But I'm not the person who makes everyone feel comfortable at networking events. That's not my strength. Maybe that's okay. Maybe Marchfield wants someone who delivers results over someone who tells good jokes at cocktail parties. You have a lot of faith in corporate decision-making. I have faith in you, Ethan said simply. From what you've told me, you've built something real, something that works. That has to count for more than Lucas's charm offensive. Vanessa looked down at her coffee, and Ethan saw something shift in her expression, vulnerability breaking through the professional armor she wore so well. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm scared. The words came out quiet, almost reluctant. Not just about losing this contract, though that would hurt. I'm scared that maybe he was right, that I sacrificed everything, relationships, personal life, any chance at normal human connection for something that's not sustainable, that I'll spend the next 20 years fighting these same battles and wake up one day realizing I'm completely alone. The honesty of it hit Ethan hard. He recognized that fear because he'd felt versions of it himself, late at night when Emma was asleep and the house was too quiet. The fear that he'd chosen wrong, that he was failing at everything that mattered, that the sacrifices he'd made weren't worth what he'd gained. You're not alone right now, he said. I'm having coffee with someone I barely know. You called me from your car last Thursday because you needed someone to talk to. You texted me at 6 this morning about the engineering team's proposal revisions. You're here, on a Friday night, when you could be anywhere else. He paused. Maybe that doesn't fix everything, but it's not nothing. And for what it's worth, I don't think you sacrificed the wrong things. I think you built something you're proud of, and Lucas couldn't handle being with someone who wanted more than he could offer. That's his failure, not yours. Vanessa was quiet for a long time, tracing patterns in the condensation on her cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. How did you get so good at this? Seeing through people's bullshit, including their own? Single parenthood. You learn fast when you're responsible for another person's emotional development. Emma asks hard questions, and I can't lie to her. Well, I can, but she sees right through it, so I got used to being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. She sounds remarkable. She is. Terrifying and remarkable in equal measure. He smiled. She says I've been happier lately. More myself, whatever that means. And have you been? Yeah, I have. The words hung between them, weighted with implication. Vanessa met his eyes, and Ethan saw recognition there. The acknowledgement that whatever was happening between them was affecting both their lives in ways that went beyond Friday night coffee. Ethan, she started, then stopped. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression changed, going from open to guarded in an instant. I need to take this. I'm sorry. She stepped outside, and through the window Ethan could see her pacing, one arm wrapped around her middle in a protective gesture. The call lasted 5 minutes that felt longer. When she came back in, she looked shaken. That was Marcus from Marchfield, she said, sitting down heavily. They moved up the presentation timeline. Want both proposals Monday morning instead of Monday afternoon. Lucas apparently called in a favor to make it happen. Can you be ready by Monday morning? Yes. We're ready now, but... She stopped, shaking her head. It's not about being ready. It's about Lucas controlling the narrative, making me react instead of act. And I'm so tired of this, Ethan. I'm tired of every professional decision being tangled up with our personal history. I'm tired of feeling like I can't win on merit alone. Then call him out on it. Vanessa looked up sharply. What? Call Lucas. Tell him you see what he's doing. Not in a confrontational way, just matter of fact. Take away his power by showing him it doesn't work anymore. That's insane. Maybe. But right now he thinks he's getting to you, and he is. So what do you have to lose by showing him you're done playing his game? She stared at him like he'd suggested she jump off a bridge. I can't just... That's not how professional relationships work. Is what you're doing now working? Silence. Then quietly, no. So try something different. Worst case, nothing changes. Best case, you take back some control. Vanessa picked up her phone, looked at it like it might bite her, then set it back down. I don't know if I can do this. Want me to sit here while you make the call? You do that? I'm already here, and I've got nowhere else to be for another hour. She took a deep breath, picked up the phone again, and pulled up Lucas's contact. Her finger hovered over the call button for several seconds. Then she pressed it. Ethan could hear the phone ringing through the speaker. 3 times. 4. He was starting to think Lucas wouldn't answer when the line connected. Vanessa. Lucas's voice came through smooth and faintly surprised. To what do I owe the pleasure? I know what you're doing, Vanessa said, her voice steadier than Ethan expected. The timeline change, the personal delivery. All of it. I don't know what you're talking about. Marchfield moved the timeline, not me. I'm just being accommodating to their needs. Right, and it's just coincidence that you called in a favor with Marcus 3 hours after our team confirmed we'd be ready for the original time slot. A pause. Then Lucas laughed, low and condescending. You really can't help yourself, can you? Always assuming everything is about you. Maybe Marchfield just wants to move faster. Maybe they have other priorities. Maybe. Or maybe you're trying to throw me off balance because you know our proposal is stronger. Vanessa's voice didn't rise, didn't waver, just stated facts. Either way, I'm done reacting to your games. We'll be there Monday morning with the best pitch we've got, and Marchfield will make their decision based on the work, not on whatever manipulation you've got planned. Manipulation? That's a strong word, Vanessa. Some might even say it's projection. Call it whatever you want. I'm just letting you know, you don't get in my head anymore. You don't get to make me second-guess myself or doubt my team or spiral into rewrites that don't need to happen. We're done with that dynamic. Another pause, longer this time. When Lucas spoke again, his tone had shifted, less amused, more annoyed. You sound different. This wouldn't have anything to do with that teacher you were cozy with at Marcello's, would it? Ethan felt Vanessa tense across the table. He gestured for her to breathe, keep going. My personal life is none of your business, she said evenly. Just interesting timing, that's all. You spend 3 years telling me you don't have time for a relationship, and now suddenly you're having coffee dates with some nobody who probably doesn't even understand what you do for a living. Makes me wonder if it was really about time, or if it was about me not being... Goodbye, Lucas. Vanessa ended the call before he could finish. She set the phone down with a hand that was shaking slightly, then looked at Ethan with something like disbelief. I can't believe I just did that. How do you feel? Terrified. Exhilarated. Like I might throw up. She laughed, a little unsteady. He's going to use that against me somehow. He's going to find a way to make me regret it. Maybe. Or maybe he'll realize you're not the same person who let him push you around 3 years ago. He called you a nobody. I am a nobody. Compared to guys like him, anyway. I teach middle school and drive a 7-year-old Honda. That's about as nobody as it gets. You're not nobody to me. The words came out fierce, almost angry. You're the person who listens when I need to talk, who challenges me when I'm spiraling, who reminds me that I'm not just a CEO, I'm a person. That matters more than whatever Lucas thinks matters. Ethan felt something warm and dangerous expand in his chest. Vanessa, I need to leave. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. I need to go process this before I say something I can't take back. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I'm sorry. I'll text you later, okay? I need to think. She was gone before Ethan could respond, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft chime. He sat there for a minute, trying to understand what had just happened. The conversation with Lucas, the intensity in Vanessa's voice when she'd defended him, the abrupt departure that felt like retreat but also like self-preservation. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. I'm sorry for running. That wasn't about you. I just need to get my head straight before Monday. He typed back, nothing to apologize for. Go do what you need to do. I'll be here if you need anything. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, thank you for everything, especially for making me call him. I think I needed that push, anytime. He finished his coffee alone, watching people come and go through the shop. Couples holding hands, students with their laptops. A woman about his age sitting by herself, reading a book, and occasionally smiling at something on the page. Normal Friday night activities for normal people with normal, uncomplicated lives. Ethan paid and left, driving home through streets that looked different somehow, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Emma was already asleep when he got back. Mrs. Chen had stayed late, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter in her careful handwriting. How was the not date? P.S. There's leftover pasta in the fridge. He heated up the pasta and ate standing at the counter, replaying the evening in his mind. Vanessa's vulnerability when she'd admitted being scared. The courage it had taken to call Lucas. The way she'd looked at him when she said he wasn't nobody to her. Something was happening between them that neither of them seemed ready to acknowledge directly. A connection that was becoming harder to categorize as simple friendship with each passing week. And Ethan didn't know what to do with that because his life was already full of responsibilities and complications. And adding a relationship, if that's even what this was, felt both terrifying and inevitable. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa. Can I call you tomorrow? Not about work stuff, just to talk. Yes, he sent back. Call whenever. He went to bed thinking about Monday's presentation, about Lucas and corporate politics, and battles that had nothing to do with him but somehow felt personal anyway. He thought about Vanessa standing in that parking lot, shaking from adrenaline and fear, and the rush of finally standing up to someone who'd had power over her for too long. And he thought about the way she'd said, "You're not nobody to me," like it was the most important truth she'd spoken all night. Saturday morning arrived with Emma bouncing on his bed at 7:30, demanding pancakes and updates on the Vanessa situation in equal measure. Ethan made pancakes and deflected questions, which satisfied neither of them, but maintained his dignity as a parent who could still have some privacy. You're being weird about her, Emma said around a mouthful of pancake. I'm not being weird. You're being so weird. You like her. We've established this. Yes, I like her. She's my friend. But you like her like her. Emma, it's okay if you do, Dad. I'm not going to be weird about it. I think it's good. You smile more now. Ethan set down his spatula and looked at his daughter, 8 years old and already more emotionally intelligent than he'd been at 30. It's complicated. Why? Because she has a really demanding job. And we have our life here. And I don't know if there's space for both things to exist at the same time. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important topics. But you're not even trying. You're just assuming it won't work. I'm being realistic. You're being scared. She said it matter-of-factly, no judgment. Which is okay, but you can't let being scared stop you from doing stuff that makes you happy. When did you become a therapist? I watch a lot of YouTube videos about emotional intelligence. You're 8. You should be watching cartoons about talking animals. Those are boring. Can I have more pancakes? He made more pancakes, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Emma scrolled through something on her tablet. Probably not the emotional intelligence videos, but he'd check the parental controls later, and Ethan tried not to think about Vanessa's call that was coming sometime today. It came at 2 in the afternoon, while he and Emma were at the park. She was on the swings, and he was sitting on a bench pretending to read a book he'd brought, but mostly just watching her and thinking. Hi, he said, answering on the second ring. Hi. Vanessa's voice sounded different than usual, quieter, less guarded. Is this a bad time? No, I'm at the park with Emma, but she's occupied. What's up? I wanted to apologize for last night, for running out like that. It was rude. It wasn't rude. You were processing something intense. That's allowed. Still, you've been nothing but supportive, and I keep having these moments where it gets too much and I retreat. That's not fair to you. Ethan watched Emma pump her legs, going higher on the swing. You don't owe me anything, Vanessa. We're friends. Friends support each other without keeping score. Are we friends? She asked it carefully, like testing the weight of the word. I thought so. Are we not? No, we are. It's just... She paused, and he could hear her searching for words. I don't usually have friends like this. People I can actually talk to. Most of my friendships are professional relationships dressed up as personal ones. But with you, it's different. It feels real. It is real. Yeah. A soft laugh. That's what scares me. Ethan understood that fear intimately. The vulnerability of letting someone matter. The risk of caring about something that could be taken away. For what it's worth, I'm scared too. Of what? Of getting attached to someone whose life is moving in a completely different direction than mine. Of starting to depend on these Friday coffee dates and phone calls and then having them disappear. He stopped, unsure how honest to be. Of what? Vanessa prompted gently. Of feeling something that isn't reciprocated, he admitted. Of reading this whole thing wrong and making it awkward. Silence on the other end, long enough that Ethan started to regret his honesty. Then Vanessa said, very quietly, You're not reading it wrong. His heart did something complicated in his chest. I'm not? No. I feel it too. Whatever this is. And I don't know what to do with it because my life is chaos right now and I can barely manage what I've already got, let alone adding something new, something that matters. So what do we do? I don't know. Keep doing this, see where it goes, try not to overthink it? That sounds reasonable in theory, but impossible in practice. She laughed, more relaxed now. Yeah, probably. They talked for another hour while Emma played, the conversation drifting through easier topics. Vanessa told him about the final revisions to Monday's presentation. Not the content, which was confidential, but the feeling of looking at something you've created and knowing it's good. Ethan told her about Emma's latest obsession with learning Python and how he was completely unqualified to help but trying anyway. Bring her by the office sometime, Vanessa said. We've got engineers who'd love to mentor a kid interested in coding. You don't have to do that. I want to. Besides, it's selfish motivation. If I can get her interested in enterprise software solutions now, she'll be perfectly positioned to work for me in about 15 years. You're recruiting 8-year-olds now? Gotta think long term. Emma came running over eventually, red-faced and demanding a push on the swings. Ethan told Vanessa he had to go, and she said okay, and they hung up with the same reluctance that had become familiar, like neither wanted to be the first to end the call. Was that Vanessa? Emma asked, reading his expression with her usual accuracy. Yeah. Is she your girlfriend now? No, maybe. I don't know. It's complicated. Adults make everything complicated. You should just ask her. Ask her what? If she wants to be your girlfriend. That's what kids do. It's easy. I don't think it works that way when you're an adult. Why not? Ethan didn't have a good answer to that. He pushed Emma on the swings instead, listening to her laugh and feeling the weight of possibility sitting heavy in his chest. Because Emma was right. In that brutally simple way kids were always right. He could just ask. Could have a conversation where they actually named what was happening between them instead of dancing around it with careful words and undefined terms. But that would require courage he wasn't sure he had. Would require accepting that something in his carefully constructed life was about to change. And change was terrifying even when you wanted it. Sunday passed in the usual rhythm of laundry and grocery shopping and helping Emma with a school project about the solar system. He didn't hear from Vanessa, and he told himself that was fine. She had a massive presentation tomorrow. She had a company to run and a board to manage and an ex-boyfriend trying to sabotage her career. She didn't need him texting her like a teenager with a crush, but he thought about her constantly anyway. Wondered how she was preparing. If she was nervous, if she'd slept. If Lucas had tried anything else. Monday morning came too early. Ethan was in the middle of his second period class, explaining cellular mitosis to a room of distracted 13-year-olds when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. During the transition to group work, he checked it quickly. 3 texts from Vanessa, all sent within the last 5 minutes. We're about to go in. I'm terrified. Thank you for everything. He typed back quickly. You're going to be amazing. Just be yourself. The competent, brilliant version that built something real. He watched the message change from delivered to read, then put his phone away and tried to focus on his students. But part of his attention stayed with Vanessa all morning. Imagining her in some conference room with polished executives and expensive suits, presenting the work she'd poured everything into. Lunch period came and went with no update. Ethan told himself that was normal. Presentations ran long. There would be questions, discussion, deliberation. She wouldn't text him in the middle of a business meeting. But by 3 o'clock, when his last class ended and he still hadn't heard anything, worry started to creep in. He was debating whether to send a check-in text when his phone finally rang. Hello? We won? Vanessa's voice was shaking. Marchfield chose us. They signed the preliminary agreement an hour ago. Relief and joy flooded through him in equal measure. Vanessa, that's incredible. I knew you could do it. It was close, really close. But our implementation timeline and customer retention data pushed it over the edge. Plus, apparently Marcus wasn't as impressed with Lucas's personal charm as Lucas thought he'd be. She laughed, giddy and exhausted. We actually won. On merit. On the quality of our work. Of course you did. That's what I've been telling you. I know. But believing it and seeing it happen are different things. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. Can I see you tonight? I know it's not Friday, and you probably have Emma's stuff, but I really want to celebrate with someone with you. I want to celebrate with you. Ethan's mind raced through logistics. Emma had soccer practice until 6. Mrs. Chen could stay late if needed. He could probably swing a few hours. Yeah, he said. Yes. Where and when? Same coffee shop, 7? I'll be there. He spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange, suspended state, excited for Vanessa but also nervous about what tonight meant. Because this wasn't their usual Friday routine. This was her actively choosing to include him in something important, wanting to share a victory with him specifically. That meant something. Emma noticed his distraction immediately when he picked her up from practice. You're doing the thing again. What thing? The phone smiling thing? Did Vanessa text you? She called. She won a big contract for her company. Emma's face lit up. That's awesome. Are you going to see her? Tonight, if that's okay. Mrs. Chen said she could stay with you. Dad, I'm 8, not 5. I'll be fine. Go celebrate with your girlfriend. She's not... He stopped. What was the point of arguing? Okay, thank you. Are you going to tell her you like her? Emma, because you should. You've been doing this weird dance thing for weeks, and it's obvious you both like each other. You should just say it. Has anyone ever told you you're very wise for your age? All the time. It's a burden I carry. They drove home, and Ethan showered and changed into clothes that Emma approved of after rejecting his first 2 choices. He felt ridiculous getting fashion advice from an 8-year-old, but she had better instincts than he did about these things. Mrs. Chen arrived at 6:30, giving him a knowing smile that suggested Emma had already briefed her on the Vanessa situation. He escaped before the interrogation could begin, driving to the coffee shop with a mix of anticipation and nerves churning in his stomach. Vanessa was already there when he arrived, sitting at their usual table, but looking different somehow. More relaxed. The permanent tension in her shoulders had eased, and when she saw him, her smile was genuine and unguarded. Hi, she said as he sat down. Hi, congratulations, for real. Thank you. She shook her head like she still couldn't quite believe it. I keep waiting for someone to tell me there was a mistake, that Lucas found some loophole or Marchfield changed their mind. But it's real. We actually did it. Your team did it. You did it. Lucas had nothing to do with it. No. He didn't. The satisfaction in her voice was clear. And when Marcus called to deliver the news, he made a point of saying their decision was based purely on the quality of the proposals. That Vanguard's was good, but ours was better. Lucas was in the room when he said it. How'd he take it? About as well as you'd expect, professional on the surface, seething underneath. He left right after without saying a word to me. She paused. It felt good, not just winning, but watching him realize that his games didn't work anymore, that I wasn't the person he could manipulate. You never were that person. You just needed to remember it. Maybe. She looked at him across the table, her expression serious. I couldn't have done this without you. The call I made Friday night telling Lucas I was done playing his games, that changed everything. Shifted my whole mindset for the presentation. Made me stop second-guessing and just trust the work. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But you got me there faster. She reached across the table and took his hand, the gesture deliberate and unmistakable. Thank you, Ethan, for being someone I can count on, for seeing me as a person instead of a CEO or a conquest or a problem to manage. That's rare. You're rare. Her hand was warm in his, and Ethan felt the moment crystallize into something significant, a crossing of a threshold they'd been circling for weeks. He could pull back now, keep things safe and undefined, or he could be honest about what he wanted. Emma's voice echoed in his head. You should just ask her. Vanessa, he said carefully, what are we doing here? She didn't pretend not to understand. I don't know. What do you want to be doing? I want to keep seeing you, not just Friday coffee dates and crisis phone calls. I want... He stopped, trying to find words that were honest without being too much. I want to figure out if this thing between us could be something real, but I need to know if that's even possible given our lives. Is that what you want? Something real? Yeah, I think it is. He met her eyes. Is that what you want? Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of his hand. When she finally spoke, her voice was vulnerable in a way he'd never heard before. I'm terrified of wanting that. Terrified of letting someone in and having it not work. Terrified of being hurt again or hurting you or screwing this up the way I screwed up everything with Lucas. You didn't screw things up with Lucas. He gave you an impossible choice and then blamed you for making it. But what if that's just who I am? What if I'm fundamentally incapable of balancing a relationship with everything else? What if I'm too focused on work, too driven, too... Stop, Ethan said gently. You're spiraling, and you're using fear as an excuse to not take a risk. Maybe I have good reasons to be afraid. Maybe you do. But I'm afraid too, and I'm still here asking, because some things are worth being afraid for. She looked at him for a long time, and he could see her working through it. The calculation of risk versus reward, the weighing of fear against possibility. Finally, she said, Okay. Okay? Let's try. Let's figure out if this can be something real. She squeezed his hand. But I need you to understand. My life is complicated. I travel for work. I have emergency calls at midnight. I miss plans because of board meetings and client crises. If we're going to do this, you need to know what you're signing up for. And you need to know that I have an 8-year-old daughter who comes first, always. That I can't do spontaneous weekend trips or late-night dinners during the school week. That my life is structured around someone else's needs. He paused. We're both coming into this with complications. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that just means we understand what we're asking from each other. When did you get so reasonable about relationships? Who says I'm reasonable? I'm terrified. But I'm also tired of letting fear make my decisions. Vanessa smiled, and it was different from any smile he'd seen from her before, open and hopeful and a little bit scared. So we're doing this. We're actually doing this. Looks like it. We're going to screw it up sometimes. Probably. And it's going to be messy and complicated and nothing like a normal relationship. I don't think either of us does normal very well. She laughed, and suddenly the tension that had been building for weeks dissolved into something lighter. They were still holding hands across the table, and neither of them moved to let go. Around them, the coffee shop carried on its usual rhythm. Students studying, couples talking, the hiss of the espresso machine, but Ethan felt like they existed in a bubble outside of all that. Just two people who'd stumbled into something unexpected and decided to see where it led. So what happens now? Vanessa asked. I don't know. I've never done this before. The whole starting a relationship with a CEO thing. And I've never dated a single parent, so we're both figuring it out. Dating, Ethan said, testing the word. Is that what we're calling this? Unless you have a better term. No, dating works, he smiled. Though Emma's going to be insufferable when I tell her she was right. Right about what? She's been insisting we were going to end up together since the second Friday. 8-year-olds are apparently very perceptive about these things. She sounds like she's handling this better than I am. She's excited, thinks I need someone to make me smile more. Do I make you smile more? Yeah, you do. They sat there for another hour, talking through logistics and concerns and what this would actually look like in practice. They agreed to keep taking it slow, to communicate honestly when things got complicated, to make space for each other's lives without expecting either of them to completely reshape around the other. It sounded mature and reasonable, and Ethan hoped they could actually pull it off. When they finally left the coffee shop, Vanessa walked him to his car. The parking lot was mostly empty, lit by overhead lights that cast strange shadows. She stood close to him, closer than she'd been before, and Ethan felt the shift between them again, from careful friendship to something more deliberate. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for all of it." "You already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it." She looked up at him, and her expression was open in a way that made his chest tight. "I'm glad you offered me your table that night. Glad I stayed. Glad we ended up here." "Me too." She kissed him then, quick and soft and probably not smart given they were in a public parking lot, but neither of them seemed to care. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Okay," she said. "Now I'm definitely doing this." "Doing what?" "Taking the risk. Being scared and doing it anyway." "Good," Ethan said. "Me too." He drove home with his heart racing and his mind spinning, trying to process what had just happened. Somewhere between offering a stranger his table and standing in a parking lot kissing her goodnight, his life had shifted onto a path he hadn't planned for. And for once, that didn't feel terrifying. It felt right. Emma was waiting up when he got home, pretending to read but clearly stalking the door. She looked up as soon as he walked in, eyes bright with curiosity. "So?" she demanded. "So what?" "Dad, don't even try. What happened?" "We're dating. Officially." Emma pumped her fist in victory. "I knew it. I told you. I specifically told you." "You were right. You're very wise." "I know." She grinned. "When do I get to meet her?" "Soon. We're taking it slow." "That means you're being boring about it. That means we're being smart about it." "Same thing." She went to bed happy, and Ethan stayed up late, sitting in his kitchen with a cup of the tea and thinking about the strange path that had led him here. A random Friday night, an empty booth, a tired woman who needed someone to be decent to her. And somehow, that small act of kindness had grown into something neither of them had expected. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. "Still can't believe today happened, any of it." He typed back, "Which part? The contract or the US thing?" "Both. All of it." "You. Get some sleep. You've had a long day." "You too." "And Ethan?" "I'm glad we're doing this. Scared, but glad." "Same." He set his phone down and stared at the dark kitchen, feeling something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. The sense that his carefully ordered life was about to get a lot more complicated, and maybe that was exactly what it needed. The first 2 weeks of dating, Vanessa felt like learning a new language while simultaneously teaching it to someone else. They were both terrible at it in completely different ways. Ethan kept defaulting to the patterns he'd built over 6 years of single parenthood, structured routines, careful planning, everything centered around Emma's schedule. He'd suggest dinner on Thursday at 6, forgetting that Vanessa had standing board meetings until 7. He'd text her good morning and not hear back until noon because she'd been in crisis mode since 5 a.m. dealing with a server issue in Singapore. Vanessa, meanwhile, approached the relationship like a project that needed managing. She'd send him her calendar for the week with available windows color-coded by priority. She'd reschedule their Friday coffee twice because client emergencies came up, then feel guilty and overcompensate by trying to plan elaborate weekend activities that didn't account for the fact that Ethan had an 8-year-old who needed to be factored into literally everything. It was messy and awkward, and nothing like the easy connection they'd found in those first few weeks of friendship. But they were trying, which counted for something. "I'm bad at this," Vanessa said on their third official date, which had started late because her afternoon meeting ran long and was now being interrupted by her phone buzzing every 5 minutes. "I don't know how to turn off CEO mode and just be a person on a date." They were at a Thai restaurant Ethan had suggested, sitting across from each other while her phone lit up repeatedly on the table between them. She'd apologized 4 times already, and each apology made her look more frustrated with herself. "You could just answer it," Ethan said. "If it's urgent." "It's always urgent. That's the problem. If I answer every urgent thing, we'll never actually have a conversation, okay? Then don't answer. But also don't apologize every time it buzzes. You're allowed to have a phone that gets messages. That's not a moral failing." She picked up the phone, glanced at the screen, and visibly wrestled with the urge to respond. Finally, she flipped it face down with more force than necessary. "There. Done. No more phone." It buzzed again immediately. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "What's the crisis?" "There's no crisis. It's just my VP of operations wants sign-off on new vendor contracts. My lead engineer has questions about the Marchfield implementation timeline. My assistant needs to know if I'm available for a call with investors tomorrow morning." She rubbed her temples. "It's all important. It's all urgent. And none of it is actually an emergency, but it feels like if I don't respond immediately, something will fall apart." Ethan recognized that anxiety. He felt it every time Emma was at a friend's house, and he couldn't shake the irrational fear that something would go wrong if he wasn't monitoring every minute. The weight of being the person everyone else leaned on. "What would happen if you didn't respond until after dinner?" he asked. "I don't know. Nothing, probably. But what if it's not nothing?" "Then you'll deal with it in an hour. Whatever it is will still be there." Vanessa looked at him like he'd suggested something radical. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy. But you're choosing to make yourself available 24/7, and that choice is eating you alive. Maybe it's okay to choose something else for an hour." She was quiet for a moment, staring at her phone like it was a bomb that might detonate. Then she picked it up, typed something quickly, and set it down again. "I told Jennifer to handle everything unless the building is literally on fire. She's my assistant. She's capable. I need to let her be capable." "Good. I'm going to be anxious about it the entire meal." "That's fine. Be anxious. But be anxious while actually having dinner with me instead of being anxious while half checking your email." She smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Okay, deal. Tell me about your day. The non-work parts, the Emma parts." So Ethan told her about Emma's latest project, building a working calculator using Python, which she'd gotten halfway through before realizing she needed to learn about functions and variables and about a dozen other concepts she hadn't covered yet. She'd gotten frustrated and declared programming stupid, then spent an hour watching YouTube tutorials before diving back in with renewed determination. "She sounds incredibly stubborn," Vanessa said. "Wonder where she gets that from." "You're not stubborn." "I absolutely am. I'm just quiet about it." They ordered food and talked through the meal, and Vanessa only checked her phone twice, both times apologizing but also seeming less frantic about it. The conversation flowed easier than it had on their previous 2 dates, finding that rhythm they'd had before the pressure of officially dating had made everything weird. Vanessa told him about the kickoff meeting with Marchfield, which had gone well, except for one executive who'd spent the entire time trying to undermine her authority by asking increasingly technical questions he clearly thought she couldn't answer. She'd answered all of them, in detail, until he'd finally shut up. "I wanted to tell him to shove his condescension where the sun doesn't shine," she said. "But I smiled and stayed professional because that's what you do." "Do you ever get tired of having to prove yourself constantly?" "Every single day. But that's the price of admission. I'm a woman running a tech company. Half the room is always going to assume I don't know what I'm talking about until I prove otherwise." "That's exhausting." "Yeah, it is." She took a sip of her wine. "But then I think about the women on my team who get to work in an environment where they're valued for their skills instead of constantly questioned, and that makes it worth it. I'm absorbing the skepticism so they don't have to." Ethan felt a surge of admiration for her that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with recognizing someone fighting battles most people never saw. "You're kind of remarkable, you know that? I'm a workaholic with control issues and a tendency to spiral under pressure. You're also brilliant and dedicated and creating space for other people to succeed. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." She looked at him across the table with an expression he couldn't quite read. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "See the good parts without ignoring the messy parts. Most people either put me on a pedestal or focus on my flaws. You somehow manage to see both and not run away screaming. Maybe I've got enough flaws of my own to appreciate messy people. You're not that messy. I stress bake at midnight, have full conversations with my daughter about whether clouds have feelings, and just spent 20 minutes earlier today searching for a hamster that's been missing for 3 weeks because I'm convinced it's going to show up in a parent conference and destroy what's left of my professional reputation. That got a genuine laugh from her. Fair point, we're both disasters. Functional disasters. Is that what we're calling it? Sounds better than acknowledging we're barely holding it together most of the time. They finished dinner and walked to the parking garage together, and when they reached her car, Vanessa turned to face him. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy with this? With us? I know it's only been 2 weeks, and I know I'm terrible at the whole dating thing, but are you okay with how this is going? Ethan thought about how to answer honestly. I'm happy when we're together. The getting to together part is harder than I expected, but that's logistics, not us. And yeah, you're not great at turning off work mode, but I'm not great at being spontaneous or flexible. We're both learning. So you're not having regrets? No. Are you? She shook her head. No regrets, just anxiety that I'm screwing this up. You're not screwing it up. We're figuring it out. That's different. She kissed him then, and it was less tentative than the first time, more sure. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Same time Friday? Wouldn't miss it. He drove home thinking about the gap between expectation and reality. In movies, relationships either worked perfectly or crashed spectacularly. Nobody talked about the messy middle ground where two people genuinely cared about each other but kept tripping over their own baggage and incompatible schedules. Emma was still awake when he got home, supposedly reading but actually waiting to interrogate him. She'd gotten more invested in his relationship with Vanessa than he was entirely comfortable with, treating it like a TV show she was following. How was dinner? She asked, not even pretending she'd been focused on her book. Good. We had Thai food. Did you talk about anything interesting or just do the boring adult small talk thing? We had actual conversations, thank you very much. What's with the third degree? I'm just making sure you're not messing it up. You have a tendency to overthink things. I'm not overthinking things. You literally just overthought whether you were overthinking things. I could see it on your face. Ethan sighed and sat down on the edge of her bed. Okay, yes, I'm probably overthinking it, but it's complicated. We have very different lives, and trying to make those lives fit together takes work. But you like her. Yes, I like her. And she likes you. I think so. Then the rest is just details. Emma said it with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never had to actually navigate a relationship. You're making it too complicated. That's easy for you to say. You're 8. Exactly. And even I can see that you're happier when she's around. So stop worrying about whether it's perfect and just let it be whatever it is. The wisdom of that hit him harder than expected. He'd been so focused on making everything work right, on finding the perfect balance, the ideal schedule, the way to integrate Vanessa into his life without disrupting Emma's routine, that he'd forgotten the simple truth underneath it all. He was happier when Vanessa was around. That mattered more than logistics. When did you get so smart? He asked. I told you. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Right, the emotional intelligence ones. Those and some stuff about coding. Did you know you can make games with Python? I did not know that. Are you planning to make games? Maybe. First I need to figure out functions. They're harder than they look. Most things are. Yeah. She yawned, finally showing signs of actual tiredness. Is Vanessa going to come over sometime? I want to meet her. Soon. We're taking things slow. You keep saying that. How slow are we talking? Because it's been weeks. We're on week 2 of officially dating, Emma. That's pretty early for introducing significant others to children. Significant other. So she's significant? Yes, she's significant. Emma grinned like she'd won something. Good. Then I definitely want to meet her. Ethan kissed her forehead and told her to sleep, then retreated to his own room where he lay awake thinking about introducing Vanessa to Emma. It felt like a big step. Bigger maybe than it should. But Emma was his whole world, and bringing someone into that world meant risk, meant the possibility that Emma would get attached to someone who might not stay, meant opening up the careful life they'd built together to outside influence. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. Made it home. Still thinking about what you said at dinner, about choosing to be available 24/7. You're right, I do make that choice. not sure how to unmake it. He typed back, "Start small, 1 hour at a time. Let other people be capable. That requires trusting other people. Trust is hard." "Yeah, but you trusted me." "That was hard too." A pause. Then, "That was different." "You're different." "How?" "You don't want anything from me except me." "That's rare." Ethan stared at that message for a long moment, feeling the weight of what she was saying. The vulnerability of admitting she'd been used for what she could provide rather than valued for who she was. "You're worth more than what you can give people," he sent back. "Someone should have told you that a long time ago. You're telling me now. That counts." They texted for another hour, the conversation meandering through topics that ranged from serious to ridiculous. Vanessa sent him a photo of her kitchen, which was pristine and clearly unused except for an expensive coffee maker. Ethan sent her a photo of his kitchen, which had Emma's homework spread across the table and a mixing bowl in the sink from last night's stress baking session. "You really do stress bake," Vanessa wrote. "Told you." The evidence doesn't lie. What were you stressed about? This. Us. Whether I'm doing this right. Are any of us doing this right? I spent 40 minutes earlier deciding what to wear to dinner like I was preparing for a board meeting. What did you land on? The blue blouse. Very professional. Definitely sent the message that I have no idea how to dress for a casual date. You looked beautiful. A longer pause this time. Then, "Thank you. You looked good too. The dorky glasses really complete the science teacher aesthetic. They're practical. They're adorable." "I'm going to pretend you didn't just call me adorable." "Too late. Already said it. You're adorable. Deal with it." Ethan smiled at his phone in the darkness of his bedroom, feeling that same warmth from earlier. They were figuring it out, slowly and messily, but figuring it out nonetheless. The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern that was chaotic, but somehow worked. They kept their Friday coffee dates, which had become sacred time that neither of them scheduled over. Vanessa started putting Ethan time in her calendar as a hard block, and while her team probably thought she was meeting with someone important for business, she was really just sitting in a coffee shop talking about everything and nothing with a middle school teacher who made her laugh. They tried to add a weeknight dinner when schedules aligned, which happened approximately half the time. The other half, something would come up. Emma had a school event. Vanessa had a client crisis. Life intervened in the way it always did for people with complicated responsibilities. But they texted constantly. Good morning messages that turned into full conversations. Photos of random things throughout the day. Vanessa would send him screenshots of particularly ridiculous corporate emails. Ethan would send her pictures of Emma's increasingly complex Python projects. It wasn't traditional dating, but it was connection, and that mattered. The real test came on a Tuesday night in week 4, when Vanessa called him at 10 p.m., which was late for both of them. "I need a favor," she said, and her voice had an edge to it he didn't recognize. "And I know it's late, and I know you have work tomorrow, but I don't know who else to ask." "What's wrong?" Lucas showed up at my office. He's gone now, but he was here in the building talking to my head of sales like they were old friends. And I need to not be alone right now. Can I come over, or can you meet me somewhere? She stopped, and he could hear her breathing hard, trying to control it. "Come over," Ethan said immediately. "Emma's asleep. Come over, and we'll figure it out." She arrived 20 minutes later, and he met her at the door before she could knock and wake Emma. She looked shaken in a way that went beyond the usual stress he'd seen from her. This was deeper, rawer. "Tell me what happened," he said, leading her to the couch. "He just showed up. Walked into my building like he had every right to be there, started chatting with Robert from sales about some mutual contact. Robert had no idea about our history, didn't think twice about it. And Lucas, he knew I'd see him, knew I'd walk past on my way out. He smiled at me like we were old friends and asked how I was doing." "What did you say?" "Nothing. I just kept walking, went to my car and sat there for 20 minutes trying to breathe normally." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I know it sounds stupid. He didn't threaten me, didn't do anything technically wrong, but having him in my space, in my building where I'm supposed to feel safe, it was like he was marking territory, reminding me that he can get to me whenever he wants." Ethan felt anger rise in his chest, hot and immediate. "That's not stupid. That's intimidation. He's trying to make you feel unsafe." "And it worked. I hate that it worked." She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I spent all day being strong and competent and in control, and then he shows up for 5 minutes and I fall apart. What does that say about me? It says you're human. It says someone you used to trust is using that history to mess with your head. That's not weakness. That's a normal response to psychological manipulation. I should be past this, past him. It's been 3 years. Trauma doesn't have a statute of limitations, and what he's doing is deliberate. You're allowed to be affected by it. She was quiet for a moment, leaning back into the couch cushions. The living room was dim, just one lamp on in the corner. Ethan could hear the house settling around them, Emma's music box playing faintly from upstairs where she'd forgotten to turn it off before bed. Thank you, Vanessa said finally, for letting me come over, for not telling me I'm overreacting. You're not overreacting, and you're always welcome here. Middle of the night, middle of the day, whenever. If you need someone, I'm here. That's a dangerous offer. I might take you up on it more than you expect. Good. Take me up on it. That's what this is for. She shifted closer to him on the couch, and he put his arm around her without thinking about it. She leaned into him, and they sat like that in the quiet of his living room while she slowly stopped shaking. Can I stay for a while? She asked. I don't want to go home yet. My apartment feels too empty right now. Stay as long as you need. They sat there for another hour, not talking much, just existing in the same space. Vanessa's breathing eventually evened out, the tension bleeding from her shoulders. Ethan ran his fingers through her hair absently, and she made a small sound of contentment that made his chest tight. I should go, she said eventually, but she didn't move. You don't have to. I have an early meeting, and Emma's going to wake up and find me on your couch, which is probably not the ideal way to introduce us. Fair point. She sat up, and he immediately missed the warmth of her against him. She looked less shaken now, more like herself. I'm okay. Really, thank you for this. Anytime. I mean that. I know you do. She kissed him, soft and grateful. I'll text you tomorrow, after I've survived whatever fresh hell Lucas has planned. If he shows up again, document it. Keep a record. What he's doing might not be technically illegal, but if it escalates, you'll want evidence. Always the practical one. Someone has to be. You're too busy being brave. She smiled at that, and he walked her to her car, waiting until she'd pulled away before going back inside. He locked up and checked on Emma, who was still asleep with her music box still playing its tinny lullaby. He turned it off and stood in her doorway for a minute, watching her breathe, grateful for the simple, uncomplicated love of a child who didn't play games or manipulate or make you question your worth. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. Made it home. Thank you again for everything. You're one of the good ones, Ethan Brooks. He sent back. So are you, Vanessa Reed. Don't let Lucas make you forget that. The next morning, Emma noticed something was different the second he walked into the kitchen. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she'd already figured out whatever he was trying to hide. Vanessa was here last night, she said. Not a question, a statement of fact. How did you... There's a coffee cup on the counter that's not yours, and you only make that decaf fancy stuff when someone else is here because you think regular coffee is fine. Ethan looked at the counter. Sure enough, there was the mug he'd made for Vanessa last night, still sitting by the sink. You're too observant. I know. So what happened? Is she okay? He debated how much to share, then remembered that Emma was 8, not 5. She could handle age-appropriate honesty. She had a rough night. Her ex is being difficult, and she needed somewhere to feel safe for a while. The guy from the restaurant? The mean one? Yeah, that guy. Emma processed this with her usual seriousness. Is he trying to hurt her? Not physically, but he's trying to make her feel scared and small, which is its own kind of hurt. That's stupid. She's not small. She runs a whole company. Yeah, but sometimes people try to make you feel small because they're intimidated by how big you are. So he's jealous. Basically. Emma nodded, satisfied with this explanation. Are you going to protect her? I'm going to support her while she protects herself. She doesn't need me to fight her battles. She needs me to be there while she fights them. That's good. She seems like the kind of person who wants to fight her own battles. She is. She very much is. When do I get to meet her for real? Not just finding her coffee cups after she leaves. Soon, Ethan said, and this time he meant it. We're working up to it. But soon. That Friday, Ethan suggested something different. Instead of their usual coffee shop, he invited Vanessa to dinner at his place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread in the low-stakes environment of his kitchen table. And Emma, who would be there, because it was time to stop keeping the different parts of his life in separate boxes. "Are you sure?" Vanessa asked when he proposed it over text. "That's a big step, meeting Emma. I'm sure. She's been asking about you constantly, and you're a significant part of my life now. Those two facts need to intersect at some point. What if she doesn't like me?" "She'll like you. She already likes the idea of you. Ideas and reality are different things." "Yeah, but I have faith in both of you. Friday at 6. Bring your appetite and maybe lower your expectations for culinary excellence." She showed up at 6:15, which was late for her, and she looked more nervous than he'd ever seen her. She had a bottle of wine in one hand and a wrapped package in the other, and she was wearing jeans and a casual sweater that somehow still managed to look expensive. "I brought wine," she said, "and I didn't know what Emma would like, so I got her this coding book I saw at the bookstore. It's about building games with Python. I thought maybe... Is that weird? Is bringing a gift on a first meeting weird?" "It's thoughtful," Ethan said, taking the wine and ushering her inside. "And she's going to lose her mind over that book. She's been trying to figure out game development for 2 weeks. Emma appeared in the doorway to the living room, clearly having been hovering and waiting for her cue. She looked at Vanessa with open curiosity, none of the shyness Ethan had worried she might feel. "Hi," Emma said. "You're Vanessa." "I am. You must be Emma. Your dad talks about you constantly." "He talks about you too, like, a lot. It's kind of gross." "Emma," Ethan warned. "What?" "It's true. You smile at your phone all the time now." Vanessa laughed, and some of her nervousness visibly eased. "He smiles at his phone when you text him too. I think it's just his thing." "Yeah, he's kind of a sap." "I'm standing right here," Ethan said. "And I'm making dinner, so maybe be nice to me." "I'm always nice. I'm delightful." Emma turned back to Vanessa. "Dad says you run a tech company. What kind of tech?" "Enterprise software solutions, which is a boring way of saying we help other companies manage their data and processes more efficiently." "So like databases and workflow automation?" Vanessa blinked. "Yes, exactly like that." "How old are you again?" 8, but I read a lot, and I've been learning about programming. Did Dad tell you I'm working on a game?" "He mentioned it. What kind of game?" And just like that, they were off. Emma dragged Vanessa to the living room to show her the partially built calculator program she'd been working on, explaining her logic with the kind of detail that suggested she'd been waiting weeks to have someone to talk to who actually understood what she was doing. Vanessa listened intently, asked questions that were genuinely interested rather than just polite, and even offered a few suggestions that made Emma's face light up. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway, stirring pasta sauce and watching them, feeling something warm and complicated settle in his chest. This was his daughter and the woman he was dating, connecting over Python code and shared curiosity, and it was working. Actually working. Dinner was chaotic in the way meals with an 8-year-old always were. Emma asked approximately 1,000,000 questions about Vanessa's company, her job, what it was like being a CEO, whether she ever fired people, how much money she made, and if she'd ever met anyone famous. Vanessa answered all of them with patience and humor, and when Emma asked the money question, she just smiled and said, "Enough to be comfortable, not enough to buy a yacht. Dad says people who buy yachts have too much money and not enough sense." Your dad is probably right about that. After dinner, Emma showed Vanessa her room, which was covered in science posters and art projects, and books stacked on every available surface. They sat on Emma's bed looking at the coding book Vanessa had brought, and Ethan watched from the hallway as his daughter leaned against Vanessa's shoulder, reading aloud about function definitions and trying to figure out how they'd apply to her game project. "This is so cool," Emma said. "Can I show you what I've done so far?" "Absolutely. I'd love to see it." They spent another hour going through Emma's code, with Vanessa pointing out where she could optimize things, and Emma soaking it up like she'd been starved for this kind of attention. Eventually, Ethan had to intervene and remind Emma it was a school night and bedtime was a real thing that applied even when interesting people were visiting. Emma hugged Vanessa goodnight, a quick, impulsive gesture that made Vanessa look surprised and pleased, and then bounded off to get ready for bed. Ethan and Vanessa were left alone in the living room, the remnants of dinner cleared away, and the house settling into its evening quiet. "She's incredible," Vanessa said. "Like, genuinely brilliant. You know that, right?" "I know, I'm reminded daily. And she's funny and confident and curious about everything. You've done an amazing job with her. She makes it easy. Well, not easy, but worth it. Which amounts to the same thing most days." Vanessa sat down on the couch, and Ethan joined her, leaving a respectful distance between them that she immediately closed by shifting closer. "Thank you for inviting me here, for letting me into this part of your life. I know that was a big step. Thank you for being great with her. I was worried it would be awkward." "Were you worried I wouldn't like her, or she wouldn't like me?" "Both, either. I don't know. This is new territory for me. I haven't introduced anyone to Emma since Sarah left." "No one in 6 years?" "There's been no one to introduce. I haven't dated, haven't had time or energy or interest. Until you." Vanessa took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I'm glad I'm the exception." "Me too." They sat there in comfortable silence for a while, and Ethan thought about how natural this felt. Vanessa in his house, sitting on his couch after having dinner with his daughter. It should have been overwhelming, the collision of his carefully separated worlds. Instead, it felt right. "Can I ask you something?" Vanessa said eventually. "Always. Do you ever worry about what happens if this doesn't work between us? Because Emma clearly likes me now, and if we break up, that's going to affect her too." It was the question he'd been avoiding thinking about, but leave it to Vanessa to ask it directly. "Yeah, I worry about that. But I worry more about teaching Emma that you don't take chances on good things because they might not last. She needs to see me being brave enough to try, even if it's scary." "That's a very mature perspective. I have my moments." He paused. "But for what it's worth, I'm not planning on this not working. I'm planning on us figuring it out, whatever that looks like. Even though it's messy and complicated and we're both disasters. Especially because of that. Perfect is boring. Messy is real." She kissed him, and it was different from their previous kisses. Less tentative, more grounded in the reality of what they were building together. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "I should go. It's late, and we both have early mornings." "Okay, but you're welcome back any time, both of you. You as my girlfriend and you as Emma's new coding mentor." "Girlfriend, we're using that term now?" "Unless you have objections." "No objections, just noting the evolution of our vocabulary." He walked her to her car, and they stood in the driveway under the porch light, not quite ready to say goodnight. "Thank you again," Vanessa said. "Tonight it was really good. Emma's amazing, and being here, in your space, seeing your whole life instead of just the parts you share on Friday nights, it made everything feel more real." "Good real or scary real?" "Both, but more good than scary." "I'll take it." She left, and Ethan went back inside to find Emma sitting on the stairs, clearly having waited for Vanessa to leave before pouncing. "I like her," Emma announced. "She's smart and nice, and she didn't talk to me like I'm a little kid. You should keep her." "I'm planning on it." "Good, because she's way better than the random moms at school who flirt with you at pickup." "I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that." "Everyone knows, Dad. Mrs. Patterson brings you cookies like twice a month. It's obvious. I'm not having this conversation with you." "Fine, but seriously, Vanessa's cool, and she makes you happy, so don't mess it up." "I'll do my best." Emma went to bed for real this time, and Ethan cleaned up the remaining dinner dishes, thinking about the evening. The way Vanessa and Emma had connected so easily. The naturalness of having Vanessa in his home, the sense that they'd crossed some invisible threshold into something more substantial than casual dating. His phone buzzed. "Vanessa. Made it home. Still thinking about tonight. About Emma and coding, and how your house feels like an actual home instead of just a place to sleep. Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for being great with her. She announced, 'You're approved and I should keep you.'" "She said that?" "Her exact words were, 'She's cool, don't mess it up.'" "Smart kid. You should listen to her. I intend to." The next 2 weeks felt different. There was a solidity to things now that hadn't existed before. Vanessa came over twice more for dinner, and each time felt more natural than the last. Emma would show her new code she'd written, or they'd talk about some article Emma had read about artificial intelligence. and Vanessa would engage with genuine interest that wasn't performed for Ethan's benefit. Lucas continued to be a problem. He'd shown up at Vanessa's office twice more, always with plausible deniability. Meeting with someone in the building just happened to be in the area. But the pattern was clear, and Vanessa had started documenting everything like Ethan suggested. Times, dates, witnesses, building a case even if she wasn't sure yet what she'd do with it. "I feel like I'm being stalked, but in slow motion," she told Ethan one night over the phone. "Like he's testing boundaries, seeing how much he can push before I push back." "Have you considered getting a restraining order?" "On what grounds? He hasn't threatened me, hasn't done anything technically illegal. He's just being present in spaces where he has legitimate reasons to be. A judge would laugh me out of the courtroom." "But you feel unsafe." "Yes, but feelings aren't evidence." Ethan hated that she was right. Hated that Lucas could manipulate the system by staying just on the right side of legal while making her life miserable. "What about talking to your board? Making them aware of the situation?" "And tell them what? That my ex-boyfriend is making me uncomfortable by being in public spaces? That makes me look weak and emotional. Like I can't separate my personal life from my professional one. That's not fair." "No, but it's reality." She sighed, and he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I'm handling it. I'm just tired of having to handle it." "I know. I'm sorry. Not your fault. But thank you for being someone I can complain to without judgment. Always." The breaking point came 3 weeks after Vanessa had first met Emma. It was a Wednesday night, and Ethan was grading papers while Emma did homework at the kitchen table when his phone rang. Vanessa's name lit up the screen, and something in his gut told him this wasn't a routine call. "Hey," he answered. "Everything okay?" "No." Her voice was shaking, tight with anger and something else he couldn't identify. "Lucas was at Emma's school." Everything in Ethan went cold. "What?" "I was driving home from work and I saw him in the parking lot of Emma's school, just sitting in his car, watching the playground. I don't know if he knew I'd see him or if he was there for some other reason, but Ethan, he knows where she goes to school. He knows about Emma." Ethan was already moving, grabbing his keys while Emma looked up confused from her homework. "When was this?" 20 minutes ago. I called you as soon as I got home. I thought about confronting him, but I didn't want to escalate. If you did the right thing, stay where you are. I'm going to call the school and make sure everything's locked down, and then we're going to figure out what to do about this." "I'm so sorry. I never thought I didn't think he'd go after Emma to get to me." "This isn't your fault. Lucas is escalating, and we're going to stop him. But right now, I need to make sure my daughter is safe." He hung up and immediately called the school's main office, explaining the situation to the night administrator who promised to alert security and the principal. Then he sat down across from Emma, who was watching him with wide eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about right now. But I need you to do me a favor. If you see a tall man with dark hair around school, someone you don't recognize, I need you to tell a teacher immediately. Don't talk to him. Don't go near him. Just find the nearest adult and tell them." "Is this about Vanessa's ex?" "Yeah, it is." Emma's expression went serious. "Is he dangerous?" "I don't think so. But he's trying to scare Vanessa by being places he shouldn't be, and I need you to be aware, okay?" "Okay." She paused. "Are you scared?" "A little, but mostly I'm angry, and we're going to handle it." "Good." She nodded firmly. "Because Vanessa's cool and bullies suck." Despite everything, Ethan smiled. "Yeah, they really do." He called Vanessa back and told her he'd alerted the school, and they talked through options. Filing a police report, even though it probably wouldn't go anywhere. Documenting this incident with the others. Maybe hiring a lawyer to send a cease and desist letter. None of it felt like enough, but it was something. "I'm coming over," Vanessa said. "I need to see that you're both okay, and I can't be alone right now. Can I come over?" "Yes, come over." She arrived 30 minutes later, looking shaken in a way that went beyond their previous conversations. Emma gave her a hug without being asked, which made Vanessa's eyes go bright with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry," Vanessa said. "I never wanted my problems to touch your life. Either of you." "Too late for that," Ethan said gently. "We're in this together now, which means we figure it out together." They sat around the kitchen table, the three of them, and talked through what had happened and what it meant. Emma listened with her usual seriousness, asking questions that were more insightful than an 8-year-old should have to ask. And Vanessa answered them honestly, not sugarcoating the situation, but also not making it scarier than it needed to be. "So, he's trying to make you scared by showing up places," Emma summarized. "But he hasn't actually hurt anyone?" "Right. That's stupid. If you keep documenting it, eventually he'll do something that proves he's harassing you. Then you can take legal action." Vanessa looked at Ethan. "Is she always like this?" "Pretty much. I've stopped being surprised. I just watch a lot of legal documentaries," Emma said. "They're more interesting than cartoons." "Of course they are." They ordered pizza because none of them felt like cooking, and they ate together while strategizing. Emma eventually went to bed, but not before making Vanessa promise she'd be careful and that she'd tell them if Lucas showed up again. "I promise," Vanessa said. "And thank you for being so understanding about all of this. Most kids would be scared." "I am scared," Emma admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean you stop dealing with the problem. It just means you deal with it while being scared." After Emma was asleep, Ethan and Vanessa sat on the couch, closer than usual, both of them processing the evening's revelations. "This is bad," Vanessa said quietly. "Him knowing about Emma. That crosses a line." "Yeah, it does." Ethan took her hand. "But we're going to handle it. First thing tomorrow, you're calling a lawyer. Not just for a cease and desist, but to understand your legal options. Document everything. Build a case. Make it clear that he doesn't get to do this." "What if it's not enough? What if he doesn't stop?" "Then we escalate. We go to the police with everything documented. We get restraining orders. We make it impossible for him to keep doing this without consequences. I don't want Emma caught in the middle of this." "She already is. Not because of anything you did, but because Lucas made a choice to involve her. And that means we protect her while also standing up to him. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Vanessa leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in the quiet of his living room, both of them thinking about what came next. The situation had shifted from uncomfortable to actively threatening, and that changed the equation entirely. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said into the silence. "Just so we're clear, this doesn't scare me away. It makes me angry, but it doesn't make me want to run. You might be crazy." "Probably, but I'm your kind of crazy." She turned to look at him, and her expression was vulnerable in a way he'd rarely seen. "I'm falling for you. I know it's fast, and I know we're still figuring things out, but I need you to know that. Because if something happens, if Lucas escalates this into something worse, I need you to know that this matters to me. You matter to me." Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. "You matter to me too, and nothing's going to happen. We're going to stop him before it gets worse." "Promise?" "I promise we're going to try. That's the best I can offer." "That's enough." They stayed like that for another hour, not talking much, just being together in the face of something that felt bigger than either of them had signed up for. Eventually, Vanessa went home, but not before making Ethan promise to text her when he woke up and when Emma got to school safely and anytime anything felt off. He promised, and he meant it. Because whatever was happening between them had moved past casual dating into something that involved protection and partnership and facing threats together. It was terrifying and overwhelming and exactly what he'd been afraid of when they started this. But it was also real. Maybe the most real thing in his life besides Emma. And that was worth fighting for. The lawyer Vanessa hired was a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in harassment cases and had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that made Ethan feel immediately better about their options. She reviewed everything Vanessa had documented, the timeline of Lucas's appearances, the witnesses, the photos Vanessa had taken of his car at Emma's school, and delivered her assessment with brutal clarity. "You have a pattern," Patricia said, sitting across from them in her office that Friday afternoon. Ethan had taken a personal day, and Vanessa had cleared her schedule. Multiple incidents over several weeks, escalating behavior, and now involvement of a minor. That's enough for a restraining order, though I'll be honest, it's not a slam dunk. He's got plausible deniability for most of these incidents. "But not all of them," Vanessa said. "Not the school. That one's harder to explain away. A man with no children sitting in a school parking lot watching the playground? That raises flags." Patricia leaned forward. "Here's what I recommend. We file for a temporary restraining order based on the pattern of harassment and the school incident. We include all the documentation. We make it clear that his behavior constitutes stalking under state law. Best case, a judge grants it and Lucas has to stay away. Worst case, we get denied, but we've created a legal record that will matter if he escalates further. What are the chances of getting it granted? Ethan asked. 60-40 in our favor. Maybe better if we can demonstrate that his behavior has caused genuine distress and disrupted your ability to work or feel safe. The involvement of the child helps our case significantly. Vanessa nodded slowly. Okay, let's do it. File for the restraining order. And Patricia, I want to be clear about something. This isn't just about me anymore. He brought a child into this. I need him to understand that crosses a line he can't uncross. Understood. I'll have the paperwork ready by Monday. We'll file first thing Tuesday morning. They left Patricia's office with a plan, which felt better than the helpless anger that had been building since Wednesday night. Ethan drove Vanessa back to her office, where she had a meeting she couldn't skip, and they sat in the parking lot for a minute before she got out. Thank you, she said, for coming with me, for taking the day off to deal with my problems. There are problems now. That's how this works. I'm still getting used to that, the hour thing. Yeah, me too. He took her hand. Are you okay? Really okay? No, I'm angry and scared and feeling violated in a way that's hard to articulate. But I'm also relieved that we're doing something, that we're not just waiting for him to escalate. We're going to stop him. I hope so. She squeezed his hand, then let go and gathered her things. I'll call you tonight after Emma's asleep. I want to hear how she's doing. Fine. Worried about you, but fine. She's remarkable, you know, the way she just processed all of this and moved forward. Most adults couldn't do that. She gets it from her dad, Ethan said, trying to lighten the mood. She gets it from you, Vanessa corrected. The resilience, the ability to face scary things head on. You taught her that. The words settled warm in his chest as he drove home. He'd spent so long worried about failing Emma, about not being enough, that he'd forgotten to notice the ways he was succeeding. She was brave and smart and compassionate, and maybe some of that came from him. Maybe he was doing better than he gave himself credit for. Emma was at Mrs. Chen's when he got home. Friday was their standing arrangement, so he had the house to himself for a few hours. He should have used the time to grade papers or meal prep for the week. Instead, he found himself in the kitchen, pulling out flour and sugar and butter, his hands moving through the familiar motions of stress baking without conscious thought. Cookies this time. Chocolate chip. The kind Emma loved and that he could bring to school on Monday to bribe his students into paying attention during their test review. Productive stress baking, that was a thing. His phone rang while the first batch was in the oven. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then thought about Patricia and court dates and the restraining order process, and picked up. Is this Ethan Brooks? The voice was smooth and familiar and made Ethan's stomach drop. This is Ethan. Who's this? Lucas Grant. I think we need to talk. Every instinct told Ethan to hang up, to not engage, to let Patricia handle this through proper legal channels. But curiosity and anger won out over caution. How did you get my number? Does it matter? Look, I'm calling because I think there's been a misunderstanding. Vanessa's got some ideas in her head about me harassing her, and I wanted to clear the air before this gets out of hand. You showed up at my daughter's school. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a threat. I was in the neighborhood visiting a client. I didn't even know that was your daughter's school. You're lying. A pause. Then Lucas's tone shifted, losing its false friendliness. You know what your problem is, Ethan? You don't understand the history here. Vanessa and I, we have 3 years of relationship that you're not part of. You don't know what we meant to each other, what we still mean to each other. I know she chose to leave you, and I know you can't handle that. She didn't choose to leave. She chose her company over having an actual life, over having someone who loved her, and now she's with you, a middle school teacher who can't possibly understand the world she operates in, and she's pretending that's fulfilling, but it's not. She's going to realize that eventually. Is that what this is about? You showing up everywhere trying to intimidate her? You think if you make her scared enough, she'll come back to you? I think she needs to be reminded that she made a mistake, that walking away from me was the worst decision of her life. Ethan felt his anger crystallize into something cold and focused. Listen to me carefully, Lucas. Vanessa doesn't belong to you. She never did. She made a choice to prioritize her career over a relationship with someone who gave her ultimatums. That was her right. And now she's made a choice to be with me. Also her right. You don't get a vote in either of those decisions. You think you're protecting her, but you're just the rebound. The safe option she's using to prove she doesn't need me. I don't care what you think I am. I care that you stay away from her, and especially that you stay away from my daughter. Because if you come near Emma again, I will make sure every lawyer, judge, and police officer in this city knows exactly what you've been doing. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. We're filing for a restraining order on Tuesday. Back off now, or this gets a lot worse for you. Lucas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its smooth edge entirely. You're making a mistake, both of you. Vanessa knows how this ends. She always comes back to me, always. Goodbye, Lucas. Ethan hung up before Lucas could respond, his hands shaking with adrenaline. He should call Vanessa immediately, should tell her about the conversation, should probably call Patricia and document this too. But first he needed to breathe, to let the anger cycle through him and out before he could think clearly. He pulled the cookies from the oven and started a second batch, the mechanical process helping to settle his racing thoughts. By the time Emma got home an hour later, he'd made 3 dozen cookies and his hands had stopped shaking. She took one look at the kitchen counter and raised her eyebrows. That's a lot of cookies, Dad. What happened? Lucas called me. The creepy ex? What did he want? To convince me that Vanessa still has feelings for him and that I should back off. Emma processed this while stealing a cookie that was still too hot to eat comfortably. That's stupid. Obviously, she doesn't have feelings for him. She has feelings for you. How can you tell? Because she looks at you the way you look at her, like you're both kind of amazed the other person exists. She took another bite of cookie. Plus, she comes over for dinner and talks about coding with me, even though she probably has a million other things to do. People don't do that unless they really care. When did you get so wise about relationships? I'm 8, not blind. Are you going to tell Vanessa about the call? Yeah, as soon as she's done with work. Good. Because secrets are bad, especially when they involve creepy exes. Ethan called Vanessa at 7, after Emma had finished her homework and was supposedly reading in her room, but probably eavesdropping from the hallway. He told her about Lucas's call, the veiled threats, the implication that she'd eventually come back to him. He actually said that? Vanessa's voice was tight with anger. That I always come back to him? His exact words. I never went back to him, not once in 3 years. He's delusional. He's also escalating. This call, combined with everything else, Patricia needs to know about it. I'll email her tonight. And Ethan, thank you for not hanging up immediately, for getting information we can use. I probably should have hung up, engaged less. Maybe. But now we know he's not going to back down just because we filed paperwork. He thinks he can intimidate his way back into my life. We need to show him that's not happening. They talked for another hour, strategizing and processing, and occasionally just sitting in silence because words felt inadequate. Eventually, Vanessa had to go deal with an engineering crisis, and Ethan went to check on Emma, who was indeed still awake and reading a coding tutorial instead of the book she was supposed to be reading for English class. Everything okay? She asked, looking up. Getting there, Vanessa's handling it. Good. I like her. I don't want the creepy ex to ruin things. He's not going to ruin things. Promise? Ethan sat down on the edge of her bed, looking at his daughter, who was trying so hard to be brave about something that shouldn't be her burden. I can't promise nothing bad will happen, but I can promise that we're doing everything we can to keep everyone safe, and that Vanessa and I were solid. Lucas can try to mess with us, but he can't actually change how we feel about each other. That's pretty philosophical for a Friday night. I have my moments. She smiled and went back to her coding tutorial, and Ethan retreated to his own room where he lay awake thinking about promises and protection, and the gap between what you could control and what you had to trust would work out. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Ethan's coffee taste wrong and his breakfast sit heavy in his stomach. Patricia had filed the restraining order at 9 a.m. Now they waited for a hearing date, which could take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks depending on the court's schedule. Vanessa texted him updates throughout the day. Patricia was confident. The judge they'd been assigned had a history of taking harassment cases seriously. Lucas had been formally served with notice of the filing, which meant he knew this was happening. And then, at 2 in the afternoon, everything went sideways. Ethan was in the middle of teaching cellular biology to his 5th period class when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Something was wrong. He excused himself to the hallway and checked his messages. 3 from Vanessa, increasingly frantic. Lucas just showed up at my office. In my office. He got past security somehow. I've locked myself in the conference room. Building security is on their way, but I need you to know in case something happens. Police are here. He's being escorted out. I'm okay, but I need to talk to you. Ethan's hands were shaking as he typed back. I'm calling you right now. She answered on the first ring. I'm okay. The police have him outside. What happened? He just walked into the building like he owned the place. Got past the front desk by saying he had a meeting with someone on the 3rd floor, then came up to my office and walked in while I was on a call. Started talking like we were having a normal conversation, saying he wanted to clear the air, that we needed to talk about the restraining order, that I was making a mistake. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly, but the implication was there. He said I was going to regret making this public, that people would take sides, and I might not like how that ended up. My assistant heard the whole thing and called security immediately. Good. That's good. Are the police arresting him? I don't know yet. They're talking to him now. Patricia's on her way. I called her as soon as security arrived. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cool wall of the hallway, trying to control his breathing. I'm coming there. I know you're okay, but I'm coming anyway. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He went back to his classroom long enough to tell his students they were doing independent reading for the rest of class, left a note for the substitute who'd cover the end of his day, and drove to Vanessa's office building with his heart pounding the entire way. The scene when he arrived was controlled chaos. Police cars were parked out front. A small crowd of Vanessa's employees had gathered near the entrance, talking in low voices. And Lucas was being loaded into the back of a police car, his expression furious and defiant. Ethan watched through his windshield as they drove Lucas away, feeling something cold and satisfied settle in his chest. This was it. The escalation they'd feared but also needed. Lucas had finally crossed a line that even plausible deniability couldn't cover. He found Vanessa on the 3rd floor, sitting in a conference room with Patricia and 2 police officers. She looked shaken but composed, answering questions with the kind of careful precision that suggested she was running on pure adrenaline and force of will. When she saw Ethan in the doorway, something in her expression cracked. She stood up and walked over to him, and he pulled her into a hug without thinking about the audience or professional boundaries or anything except the fact that she was okay. I'm fine, she said against his shoulder. I'm fine. I know, but I needed to see it. The police finished their questions and left with promises to follow up. Patricia stayed behind, reviewing the incident report and making notes. This changes everything, Patricia said. He violated the temporary restraining order before it was even formally issued. Showed up at your workplace, made implicit threats in front of witnesses. The police are charging him with trespassing and harassment. We're going to push for a permanent restraining order, and given this incident, I'd say our chances just went from 60-40 to 90-10. What happens now? Vanessa asked. Lucas will be arraigned probably tomorrow. He'll likely make bail, but he'll have conditions attached. Stay away from you. No contact. Possibly electronic monitoring. If he violates those conditions, he goes to jail. No exceptions. So it's over. The immediate crisis is over, but you'll need to stay vigilant. Document everything. Keep your security team aware. Don't engage if he tries to contact you through third parties. Patricia looked at Ethan. Same goes for you. If he reaches out again, document it and tell me immediately. Don't engage. They thanked Patricia, and she left with more promises to keep them updated. Vanessa's assistant brought them coffee they didn't drink, and they sat in the conference room as the office slowly returned to its normal rhythm around them. I can't believe he actually did it, Vanessa said finally. After everything, after the lawyer, the restraining order, the warnings, he still couldn't stop himself. That's how bullies work. They keep pushing until someone stops them. You stopped him. You told me to document everything, to get a lawyer, to not back down. If I just tried to handle this myself, tried to stay professional and not make waves, he would have kept escalating until something worse happened. You did the right thing. She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I was so scared. When he walked into my office and I realized security hadn't stopped him, I thought about Emma, about you, about what would happen if he hurt me and you had to explain that to an 8-year-old. Don't go there. You're okay. Lucas is in custody. We're going to make sure he can't do this again. I know that logically, but the fear doesn't go away just because the threat is neutralized. No, it doesn't, but it fades, eventually. They sat there in the conference room until Vanessa's hand stopped shaking and her breathing evened out. Then Ethan drove her home, following her car, to make sure she got there safely, and walked her up to her apartment that he'd only been to twice before. "Stay," she said at the door, "just for a while. I don't want to be alone yet." "Okay. Let me call Mrs. Chen and tell her I'll be late picking up Emma." Her apartment was exactly what he'd expected, sleek and modern and meticulously organized in a way that suggested she didn't spend much time actually living there. But she had a comfortable couch and a view of the city, and they sat together watching the sunset while Vanessa slowly came down from the adrenaline high. "Can I tell you something?" she said eventually. "Anything. I'm glad it was you. That I met you that night at Marcello's. That you offered me your table and refused to let Lucas intimidate you and showed me what it looks like when someone supports you without trying to control you." She turned to look at him. "You gave me the courage to stand up to him, to stop accepting his manipulation as normal. I wouldn't have done that on my own." "Yes, you would have. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you would have gotten there. Maybe. But having you there made it possible to get there now, to not spend another year, another 3 years, letting him make me feel small." Ethan took her hand, threading their fingers together. "You were never small. You just couldn't see it because he spent so much time trying to convince you otherwise. I see it now, because of you." They stayed like that until Ethan really did have to leave to get Emma. Vanessa walked him to the door, and he kissed her goodbye with the kind of intensity that came from almost losing something you'd just realized you couldn't live without. "I'll call you tonight," he said. "After Emma's asleep, we'll figure out what happens next. What happens next is we keep doing this. Keep being together. Keep proving that Lucas was wrong about everything." That sounds like a plan. The hearing for the permanent restraining order was scheduled for the following Monday. Ethan took another personal day. His principal was starting to give him looks, but this mattered more than perfect attendance, and sat with Vanessa while Patricia presented their case. Lucas was there too, with his own lawyer, looking significantly less composed than the last time Ethan had seen him. The charges from Tuesday had shaken him, that much was clear. He wouldn't make eye contact with Vanessa, and when his lawyer tried to argue that this was all a misunderstanding, the judge shut him down with a look. "Mr. Grant," the judge said, looking over the stack of documentation Patricia had provided, "I've reviewed the evidence presented by Ms. Reed's counsel. Multiple incidents of unwanted contact, appearing at her workplace, surveilling a school attended by Ms. Reed's boyfriend's minor child, and most recently violating a temporary restraining order by entering Ms. Reed's office and making implicit threats. Do you understand that this behavior constitutes harassment under state law?" "Your Honor, I never intended," Lucas started. "I asked if you understand, yes or no?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Then you'll understand why I'm granting a permanent restraining order with the following conditions. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Ms. Reed at all times. You are not to contact her directly or through third parties. You are not to go to her workplace, her home, or any location you have reason to believe she'll be present. Violation of these terms will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. Do you understand these conditions?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. This order is permanent unless modified by future court action. Ms. Reed, if Mr. Grant violates these terms in any way, you contact the police immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Let law enforcement do their job." "I understand, Your Honor." "Thank you." They left the courthouse together, and the relief on Vanessa's face was so profound it almost broke Ethan's heart. She'd been carrying this weight for weeks, months if you counted the years with Lucas before that, and now it was finally lifted. "It's over," she said, standing on the courthouse steps in the spring sunshine. "It's actually over." "It's over," Ethan confirmed. "He can't contact me, can't come near me, can't show up at Emma's school or your house or anywhere else. And if he does, he goes to jail." She laughed, slightly hysterical with relief. "I can't believe it took this long, that I let it go this far before doing something." You did something as soon as you realized you could. That's what matters. They went to lunch to celebrate, a nice restaurant that wasn't Marcello's because neither of them wanted those associations, and talked about everything except Lucas. Vanessa told him about the Marchfield implementation, which was going smoothly and ahead of schedule. Ethan told her about Emma's game project, which had evolved from a simple calculator to something involving multiple levels and a scoring system. She's going to run her own company before she's 20, Vanessa predicted. That would be terrifying. That would be amazing, and I'd hire her in a heartbeat. They lingered over coffee, neither ready for the afternoon to end. Finally, Vanessa said, I want to do something just for us, not because of Lucas or legal proceedings or anything else, just because I want to spend time with you. What did you have in mind? This weekend, Saturday, you, me, and Emma. We could go to that science museum she's been asking about. Make a day of it. Normal family stuff. Ethan felt something warm bloom in his chest at the word family. Yeah, I'd like that. Emma would love it. Good. Then it's a plan. Saturday arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for a museum trip. Emma had been vibrating with excitement since Ethan told her about the plan, and she'd researched the museum online to make a list of exhibits she wanted to see. The list was color-coded by priority. She was definitely his daughter. They met Vanessa in the museum parking lot, and Emma immediately launched into an explanation of her prioritized exhibit list and why the robotics section had to be first, because it was the most popular and would be crowded later. I see you've prepared thoroughly, Vanessa said, looking at the printed spreadsheet Emma had created. Always be prepared. That's what Dad says. Your dad is very wise. Sometimes. Other times he's kind of a disaster. I'm standing right here, Ethan protested. We know, Emma and Vanessa said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. Ethan followed behind them as they entered the museum, watching Emma point out various exhibits with enthusiastic running commentary and Vanessa engaging with genuine interest. They spent 3 hours wandering through robotics and physics and the planetarium show, and Ethan took approximately 100 photos on his phone because this was the kind of day you wanted to remember. At lunch in the museum cafe, Emma announced that this was the best Saturday she'd had in a long time, and then asked Vanessa if she was officially Ethan's girlfriend or if they were still in the figuring it out phase. Vanessa looked at Ethan, eyebrows raised. What phase would you say we're in? I'd say we're pretty officially past the figuring it out phase. Good, because I'd like to keep doing this. The museum trips and dinners and being part of your lives. We'd like that too, Emma said. Right, Dad? Right, definitely right. They finished lunch and did another hour in the museum before Emma finally admitted she was tired. They walked back to the parking lot together, and when they reached Vanessa's car, Emma gave her a hug that was becoming their standard goodbye. Thank you for today, Emma said. It was really fun. Thank you for letting me be part of it, and for sharing your color-coded exhibit plan. That was very professional. I'm thinking about going into project management when I grow up. You'd be excellent at it. Emma went to wait by Ethan's car, giving them a minute of privacy that was transparently intentional. Ethan smiled at Vanessa. She's not subtle. No, but she's sweet. Vanessa moved closer to him. Today was perfect. Just normal family stuff, like I said. No drama, no crisis. Just time together. We should do it more often. Yeah, we should. He kissed him, quick and affectionate. Same time next Friday? Coffee shop? Wouldn't miss it. He drove home with Emma chattering about the exhibits they'd seen and the experiments she wanted to try based on what she'd learned. But underneath her excitement, Ethan felt something settle into place, a sense that the chaos of the last few months had finally resolved into something stable and good. That night, after Emma was asleep, he sat in his kitchen with tea and his phone, scrolling through the photos from the day. Vanessa and Emma laughing at something in the robotics exhibit. Emma explaining the physics of momentum with exaggerated hand gestures. Vanessa looking at him with an expression that made his chest tight. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Thank you for today, for letting me into your world, into Emma's world. I know that was a big step, and I don't take it lightly. Thank you for being someone worth taking that step with, he sent back. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm happy. Like genuinely, consistently happy in a way I haven't been in years, maybe ever. And that's because of you. Ethan stared at that message, feeling emotion well up that he didn't quite have words for. So he sent back the simplest truth he had. I'm happy too. You make me happy. They texted for another hour, the conversation drifting through topics both meaningful and mundane. Eventually, Vanessa had to go deal with an early morning conference call with Singapore, and Ethan went to bed thinking about happiness and how it wasn't a destination you reached, but something you built slowly with another person through shared days and honest conversations and choosing each other over and over again. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Vanessa came over for dinner twice a week, usually Wednesday and Friday. Emma had standing permission to text Vanessa with coding questions, which she did approximately daily. And Ethan and Vanessa kept their Friday coffee dates sacred, protected time where they talked about everything and nothing while the world moved around them. Lucas became a non-presence in their lives. The restraining order held. He didn't contact Vanessa, didn't show up anywhere he shouldn't. Patricia had warned them he might try to work around the order using mutual contacts or business connections, but either he'd finally gotten the message or the legal consequences had actually scared him straight. Ethan allowed himself to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, to believe that maybe this was it, the resolution they'd been fighting for. And with that belief came space to think about what he and Vanessa were actually building together. One Friday evening, about 3 months after the restraining order was granted, they were at their usual table in the coffee shop when Vanessa said, "I've been thinking. That's usually dangerous. Probably, but I'm going to say it anyway." She took a breath. "I want this to be permanent. Us. I know we're still figuring out logistics and schedules and how to make our lives fit together, but I don't want to figure it out as a temporary thing. I want to figure it out as the actual shape of my life going forward." Ethan felt his heart rate pick up. "Are you asking me what I think you're asking me?" "I don't know. What do you think I'm asking? If we're doing this for real, if we're building towards something long-term instead of just seeing where it goes." "Yeah, that's what I'm asking." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I want that too. I've wanted it for a while, actually. I just didn't know how to bring it up without sounding like I was rushing things." "How long is a while?" "Since the restraining order hearing. Maybe before. I kept looking at you and thinking, this is it. This is the person I want to build a life with." Vanessa's eyes went bright, and she blinked rapidly like she was trying not to cry in the middle of a coffee shop. "Really?" "Really. You and Emma have this thing, this friendship or mentorship or whatever you want to call it, that makes my heart explode every time I see it. And you make me feel like I'm allowed to want things for myself instead of just being Emma's dad. Like I can be both, partner and parent. And that's everything." "I love you," Vanessa said, and it came out fierce and certain. "I know we haven't said that yet, and maybe it's too soon, but I love you. Both of you. This whole chaotic, beautiful life you've let me into." "I love you too," Ethan said, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Have for weeks, maybe longer. They sat there grinning at each other like idiots while the coffee shop carried on around them. Eventually, Vanessa laughed. "So what now? Do we make plans, talk about timelines, figure out what the next step looks like?" "I think we just keep doing what we're doing. Dinner twice a week, Friday coffee dates, building something together slowly. And when it makes sense to take the next step, moving in together or whatever that looks like, we'll figure it out. That sounds reasonable and mature and nothing like how I usually approach things. Maybe that's growth. Maybe it's you rubbing off on me. I'll take credit for that." They stayed until the coffee shop closed, talking through possibilities and dreams and the practical realities of blending their complicated lives. It wasn't neat or simple or anything like the fairy tale endings Emma probably imagined, but it was real, and it was theirs, and that mattered more than perfect. When Ethan got home that night, Emma was waiting up despite it being way past her bedtime. She took one look at his face and grinned. "You told her you love her." "How do you—" "Dad, you have the same dopey look you had when I was 6 and you figured out how to fix my toy robot. You're not subtle." "Apparently subtlety is not a family trait." "So what happens now? Is she moving in? Are we moving to her fancy apartment? Are you getting married?" "Slow down. We're not rushing into anything. We're committed to building something together. The details will come later." Emma considered this, then nodded. "Okay, that's good. I like her. I want her to stick around." "Me too, kid. Me too." "Good. Now go to bed. You're old and you need your rest." "I'm 32. Like I said, old." He went to bed happy, feeling the weight of possibility settle around him like a comfortable blanket. This was it. This was what happened when you took a chance on kindness and it grew into something bigger than either of you expected. 6 months later, Vanessa moved in. Not into Ethan's house, which was too small for all of them, but into a new place they found together. Something with space for Emma's projects and Vanessa's home office, and a kitchen big enough for Ethan's stress-baking sessions. Emma got to design her own room and declared it the best decision any adult had ever made in the history of adults making decisions. They were still figuring it out, still navigating the complications of blended lives and competing schedules and the million small compromises that came with building a life together. But they were figuring it out together, and that made all the difference. Lucas became a distant memory, a cautionary tale about what happened when you tried to control someone instead of loving them for who they were. The restraining order remained in place. Vanessa occasionally heard about him through industry connections. He'd left Vanguard, started his own consulting firm, was apparently dating someone new. She hoped he'd learned something from the experience, though she doubted it. Some people never learned. But that wasn't her problem anymore. Her problem was trying to teach Emma about database normalization while Ethan made dinner. Her problem was balancing board meetings with family game nights. Her problem was figuring out how to make space for everything she wanted instead of choosing between career and connection. And those were good problems to have. One evening, about a year after they'd moved in together, Ethan found Vanessa sitting on their back porch with a glass of wine, staring at the sunset. He joined her with his own glass, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. "That night at Marcello's, when you offered me your table. How different my life would be if I'd just left instead of staying." "You think about that a lot?" "Sometimes. Not with regret, just with gratitude. That I said yes when every instinct told me to keep my walls up and stay guarded. I'm grateful too, for whatever impulse made me speak up instead of letting you leave. It was kindness. That's what it was. Simple human kindness from someone who didn't want anything from me except to share a meal." She turned to look at him. "That's what changed everything. You treated me like a person instead of a CEO, or a conquest, or a problem to manage. Just a person who'd had a bad day and needed someone to be decent to her." Ethan took her hand, thinking about that night and how small gestures could ripple out into something neither person expected. How offering a table could become offering a life. "You know what I learned from all of this?" he said. "From us. From Lucas and the restraining order and building something real despite all the obstacles." "What?" "That vulnerability isn't weakness. That asking for help isn't failure. That letting someone in, really in, past all the armor and fear, that's the bravest thing you can do. And that sometimes the smallest acts of courage, offering a table, making a phone call, standing up to someone who's trying to diminish you, those are the things that change everything." Vanessa leaned her head on his shoulder. "That's very philosophical for a Friday evening." "I have my moments." "You have a lot of moments. It's one of the things I love about you." They sat there as the sun set, turning the sky orange and pink and purple, and Ethan thought about how far they'd both come. From strangers sharing a table to partners sharing a life. From isolation to connection. From fear to courage. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been perfect. There had been setbacks and complications and moments when either of them could have walked away and saved themselves the trouble. But they hadn't. They'd chosen each other, over and over again, through the chaos and uncertainty and fear. They'd chosen to believe that some things were worth fighting for, that connection mattered more than convenience, that love, real love, the kind that saw you fully and accepted what it found, that love was worth the risk. Emma came outside, declaring that dinner was ready even though neither of them had been cooking. Turned out she'd ordered pizza without asking, which was very much on brand for her. "I got your favorite," she told Vanessa. "The one with the fancy cheese that Dad thinks is overpriced." "It is overpriced," Ethan protested. "But it's delicious," Vanessa said. "Thank you, Emma." They went inside together, and Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his daughter and his partner bicker good-naturedly about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. This was his life now. This beautiful, chaotic life full of people who saw him and chose him and made space for his flaws while celebrating his strengths. And it had all started with a simple decision to offer a table to a stranger who looked like she'd had a bad day. Sometimes, he thought, the The smallest acts of kindness opened doors you didn't even know existed. Sometimes taking a risk on connection, on being vulnerable, on choosing openness over self-protection, that was how you built something real. You didn't get there by being perfect. You got there by being brave enough to try, by showing up, by choosing someone over and over again until the choosing became as natural as breathing. And that, Ethan realized, was the point of all of it. Not the destination, not the perfect ending, but the daily choice to love someone despite the complications, to build something together even when it was hard, to believe that maybe, just maybe, you deserved happiness and connection and a life that felt full instead of empty. He joined his family at the table where Emma was explaining her latest coding project and Vanessa was listening with genuine interest. And he thought, this is enough. More than enough. This is everything.